I wasn't recording. Can we do that again?
Oh
my god. Well, hey, better that we found...
Yeah, it's a good thing
I
we found
noticed
that out
now. Okay,
Yeah.
I need to turn it back up again. Please hold.
Damn, I was like, oh, is this going to be a story I can put as a cold open for the episode? And it turns out you weren't even recording.
Nope. Sorry. Hey, at least I caught it before we actually got into the episode, because that would suck. What is the feature-length podcast? Anyone?
The feature-length podcast is a show where three idiots talk about film and entertainment.
Good answer.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, are you talking to us?
Yeah. I'm talking to the voices in my head.
Like, I truly don't know. It felt like a fever dream. I swear to God, I could not
It sounds so stupid hearing that.
If you're listening to this is a podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies and TV for a feature length of time.
Get your stinking paws off us, you damn dirty listeners! That's right, everyone. This week on the FLP, we are talking about the Matt Reeves Planet of the Apes trilogy. And by Matt Reeves, we mean only the second two movies were directed by him, but we attribute the whole trilogy to him anyway. For those unaware, Planet of the Apes is one of the oldest and longest-running sci-fi franchises, really only comparable to Star Trek in terms of its longevity. The first film, Planet of the Apes, was made in 1967, co-written by Rod Serling of the Twilight Zone fame, based off of a famous French sci-fi novel of the same name. It posits the single most important question in all of cinematic history. What if, and stick with me here, a planet, but apes? The original novel and resulting movie are still hailed to this day as classic landmarks of science fiction, using high-concept ideas to paint a reflection on society, with the original film raising issues including inequality, subjugation, religious dogma, and abhorrent violence. The film ends with our protagonist, Taylor, discovering a destroyed Statue of Liberty and realizing that the planet of apes he crash-landed on was actually Earth in the far-distant future. Due to the great critical and commercial success of this, a bunch of garbage sequels were released. Starting with Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Film 2, and it has a second astronaut crash land just after the events of the first film. This astronaut discovers that Taylor from the first film has been taken underground and held hostage by a group of surviving humans, whose heads look like Megamind's head from the movie Megamind. These humans can speak telepathically and worship a nuclear bomb as a religious symbol. The film ends with a big battle, and Taylor presses a button to fire the nuke. The screen then fades to white, and text over the top reads that the Earth was destroyed by the nuke. The end. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. While the first film has some of the best production design and visual effects ever used, the second film looks like it was shot in a backyard and edited on an iPhone. I strongly recommend watching it, though. Movie 3, Escape from Planet of the Apes, sees the scientist apes from the first movie travel back in time to 1970s Earth, bringing their baby, Caesar. The film creates an alternate timeline that is followed up in films 4 and 5, Conquest 4 and Battle of the Planet of the Apes. In this alternate timeline trilogy, the baby Caesar grows up with the knowledge of the future and is able to create an ape uprising in which both humans and apes can live together. There are also numerous comics, novels, and even a couple of TV shows that fill in the gaps of the original timeline leading up to the original Planet of the Apes. But this is an IP, so Warner Brothers couldn't leave well enough alone. After almost 3 decades of no new live-action Planet of the Apes content, they needed a reboot. So they hired Tim Burton. That's right, before the new trilogy, they tried another reboot first. And this one was basically a remake of the first movie, but staying closer to the original novel. It's really bad. So, after another decade, WB decided to finally let people who give a shit make movies that weren't just cash grabs, greenlighting Rise of the Planet of the Apes. At the time, the movie was more of an experiment. Can we make a prequel to Planet of the Apes? What resulted was a pretty well thought out sci-fi story with cool character moments for our lead ape, Caesar. A nice standalone prequel to the original film. And then Matt Reeves took over and does what Matt Reeves does best, which is blow everyone's mind with how simultaneously talented and nerdy he is. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, movie 2 in this modern trilogy, focuses on the parallel creation of ape society and the downfall of the human one, while laying the seeds within the ape society's struggle to explain how societal collapse happens. The final movie in the trilogy, War for the Planet of the Apes, does what any good third act should. It takes the setup and pays it off. The apes attempt to flee to their new homeland as the last of humanity dies. Caesar's character arc is complete, but ape society has been irrevocably changed. You know what? You just say that word and edit it in correctly.
I don't even know what word you were trying to say.
Irrevocably?
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 Yes. As the apes enter their new home and lose their first and best leader, they are now left to try and deal with their collective trauma. Spoiler alert, that's not going to happen, because despite some minor inaccuracy in the dates, these 3 movies serve as a startling and almost pitch-perfect prequel trilogy to the original Planet of the Apes, while also standing alone as solidly written, visual effect pioneering modern sci-fi, all of which we are going to discuss right now. I am joined, as always, by Dan.
Hello.
And Carolina.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Marco. I know way too much about Planet of the Apes, as you can probably tell from that intro. And we're going to talk about the Matt Reeves trilogy right now. Who would like to go first?
I vote Carol should go first because she's seen these movies before, but she seems the most new coming to the series. That's just my opinion.
Sure.
I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, let's do
If
that.
that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, why not? I didn't have fun.
You didn't have fun?
No, you know what
Or
I
you did?
realized? I don't give a shit what a Planet of Apes is gonna be like. I don't care at all. Not even a little bit. And so by movie 3, I was really like, okay, like, let's end, like, I understand, like, it's so interesting, like, wow, like, basically concentration camps for monkeys, like, OMG, you're really saying something here,
Monkeys?
like, wow.
Monkeys.
Okay, yeah, I know. All of my notes
They're apes.
for the first movie, I started saying monkey, 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 and then they said,
Yeah.
they're apes, not monkeys. And I was like, okay, well, fucking call me out. And I still called them monkeys through all of my
That's
notes.
fine.
But yeah, they were fine. The first movie, I don't think I ever saw the third movie. Unless Marco's
No.
going to correct me. Okay, thank you.
No. We only watched the first 2.
Yeah, because I remember seeing the first and even recognized parts of the second. So I don't know if I like went and watched them myself or if we watched them together. I don't remember.
No, you came to the movie theater. We watched the second one.
Okay, and then first one at your house?
Yeah, I showed you
Okay.
before we went
yeah,
to see the
so that
second
checks
one.
out. So that was like familiar to me. And then the third one was not at all familiar to me. I guess I like appreciated them starting with like all of the titles. Like, wow, good for them. But just like I saw that every movie got longer, and that like bummed me out. And like there was like less and less humans, or like if there were, the humans were like worse. And I'm like, yeah, of course humans are gonna get worse because like we suck. Like I don't know. I don't need to see this. This isn't good for anyone. And also the second movie, I fully forgot. It's a pandemic? You're really trying to make us watch this right now?
No. I, when we started watching it, I was like, oof, this is not good.
Literally.
They had the masks. Like,
They had the masks.
Very familiar masks.
They were talking about the spread. People were like, we need to go on with
There
our
was
lives.
the
I
whole
was
first
like,
5 minutes
oh, no.
is that like the graph,
The
of, like,
map
the
of it,
spread
yeah.
of the virus. Yeah.
Literally. And like initially when I finished watching the first film, I didn't see like that post-credit scene of like the pilot guy going.
Yeah.
And then like Disney Plus was like, hey, you didn't finish this movie. And I was like, yeah, I did. But I played it anyway. And then I saw it and I was like, oh, damn. Okay, I see where we're going.
Yeah.
And I hated that simply because of like, you know, the trauma of like living through it basically. But I guess
we've all
it's
been there.
better.
We've all been there.
I guess
all
it's
been on a Planet of Apes.
a better outcome for us, I guess.
I mean, remains to be seen.
In real life, you mean?
Yeah,
knows?
because like at least monkeys didn't kill all of us.
Maybe this
maybe-
is all just an advertising scheme for the next Planet of the
Maybe.
Apes movie.
Maybe.
Can you imagine if that's revealed? Because they're in production now. But anyway, this goes way beyond my initial thoughts. I don't care about apes, is what I discovered. So it was like fine. But also, you know me, I'm not really big on like war and action and fighting. So this just didn't
Yes.
really like hit any of the things I cared about. I liked seeing Woody Harrelson because I'm obsessed with that guy. But other than that, you know, it was like fine. Also, the guy who's in the second movie, like the main guy, the entire time I thought it was Wyatt Russell until I Googled
Oh.
it. I have
Really?
no idea why, yes.
I can see that, but he's too old. to
No,
be
I
Wyatt
mean, I don't
Russell.
even see it at all, but
I
definitely
like
see
fully
it,
in
like-
my notes was referring to him as Wyatt Russell.
Wow, okay.
And then the credits were rolling and his name didn't pop up and I was so
I would never
confused.
confuse him with Wyatt
No,
Russell, but
Yeah,
it's okay.
that's my bad. But yeah, so it was like fine. I'm excited to hear your guys' thoughts.
The kid from Power of the Dog is in that one, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't realize
like
that
one of his
till
first movies, I think.
my research 5 minutes ago.
It's kind of like Timothy being in Interstellar.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh yeah, this guy.
Good for
That's like
him.
and a real actor now was like in this movie
Yeah,
before.
wasn't he nominated for an Oscar?
Oh, Timothy
Chalamet,
Chalamet.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess they
for Power
both
of
were.
the Dog, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll go next, I guess.
Okay.
All right. So I saw the first movie well after it came out in theaters, like probably like 2013, 14 or something. And then I saw Dawn and War in theaters. And then since we saw War in theaters together, I haven't seen these movies since our last rewatch.
Yeah.
And I was a little disappointed because I remember liking them a lot more. Like, these were my shit when, like, in that era of, like, 2014 to 2017. I guess I kind of feel the same way you do, Kara, where it's like, they're good, like, they're not bad movies, but it's just kind of like take it or leave them.
Yeah, I recognize that. I'm not saying they're bad, it's just, like, not for me.
Yeah.
I think this episode's going to be interesting at the very least. But yeah, I was just a little bit, I guess disappointed is the right word, because I remember these being like, holy shit, I'm so looking forward, like, just in preparation for this episode, it's like, wow, I can't wait to revisit these movies and, like, actually have, like, an in-depth discussion about them. But I don't really have anything insulting to say about them, so I'll just leave it there for now.
I thought you were going to say you don't have anything to say about them at all.
No, I don't.
Like,
End the episode.
It's going to be a really short episode. I have stuff to say about them, just I'll leave it in general there for now.
As long as you have something to say.
I do, I promise.
Yeah, I saw Rise on, like, DVD.
Wow, DVD.
Maybe a year, or maybe it was Blu-ray, I don't know. A year after it came out. Only because my dad and uncle actually, like, were fans of the Planet of the Apes franchise. I had no connection to it. But then when the new one came out, I watched it with them, like, one Christmas break or whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, like, this is dope. And then I made everyone watch it that I knew, and they were all like, oh yeah, this is pretty dope.
Classic Marco technique.
Classic. I'm like a human virus. I'm like, yeah, but then, yeah, I saw Dawn in theaters, also really loved it, and then War when it came out. But that was the last time I'd seen any of these, because I showed Maddie Rise and Dawn, and then she came to see War with us, and she was like, do I have to watch these fucking movies? But, like, I showed them to her, and she was like, oh, you know what, no, like, I'm actually into it, like, yeah, Caesar, it's sad, like, nice character arc, obviously well acted by Andy Serkis, like, that,
oh yeah.
So she was into it, so we watched War. I remember really liking War. But this is all to say that, like, around that period, so sort of like 2015, 16, going into War is when I got really into, like, the original Planet of the Apes stuff, just because I'm into, like, retro sci-fi. And, like, hadn't seen these new movies since then, but have rewatched the old ones a lot because they are shorter and ridiculous and just silly fun, retro sci-fi, and I like them. Read a lot of the comics and stuff. Yeah, and so I was also coming back to it a little bit disappointed, just because I guess for me, like, the original ones are just, like, this, like, fun niche thing, and these ones just aren't that, and so I was kind of, like, disappointed. Psych! You just got trolled, Carol!
I have nothing but good things to say about these movies. Everything I just said in my intro was a lie.
Get fucked!
We just wanted to see how much we could convince you of, like, we really don't like these movies. I fucking love these movies.
These movies, this is my favorite trilogy of all time.
Dan, I so believed you.
Thank you.
No problem.
I think that is a compliment.
Yeah, you're a great actor.
Thank you.
We, I came up with this joke, like, a few days ago.
Yeah, this is Marco's idea.
I was like, hey, let's see if we can trick Carol. And then, like, hearing your opinions, I was like, oh, this is...
It's
chef's
perfect.
kiss. This is, like, the perfect setup for this joke.
It's perfect because, like, so much of mine was just, like, jumping off what you said.
Yeah.
You set me up really well, Carol.
Well,
Wonderful.
You're welcome. It's funny because when you were like, go first, I was like, shit, I know how much these guys love this trilogy because every time it comes up, they're like, oh my god, it's great. And I'm like, haha, I hated it.
You were just playing into our game.
Yeah,
it's fine.
It's fine.
Wow.
It's all been a long con.
Guys, April Fools was 3 days ago. This is unnecessary.
Oh, well. That had nothing to do with April Fools either.
No. I just thought it was funny.
Interesting. Just fun.
Absolutely love this.
So I guess I'll just, like, go back and edit what I said. So, like, I've seen this trilogy multiple times since 2017. I own it, and, like, I watch it at least once or twice a year.
Twice a year?
That's maybe a lot, like, guys. Sometimes twice a year, at least once a year. It's not. It's ape.
It would be a lot of monkey, except they're apes, so it's not.
I will say ape from now on, I think, unless I forget.
Thank you. Show them respect.
So I'm really sorry to say it, but I think I disagreed with everything you said, Carol.
Sure, go ahead.
That's just how
fair.
it is.
Yeah.
That's how it be sometimes.
Yeah. I think this is the first time where I can say, like, I don't think I agreed with a single... It's going to be an interesting discussion.
It's going to be a fun discussion, yeah.
But yeah, just for the record, I don't think I have... I have pretty much only good things to say about this trilogy going forward. Also, I didn't mention... because I was doing my shtick. I've also seen the original Planet of the Apes well after the fact of watching this prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
So the prequels were the first Planet of the Apes stuff I'd ever seen, and then I retroactively went back, watched the original, and I was blown away. And we'll talk about it, of like Matt Reeves, well, not just Matt Reeves. What was the name of the director of the first one? I think it was like Wyatt.
I'll look it up.
Rupert Wyatt or something. No, it's
Rupert Wyatt, I think.
Close. Let's just say it's that. That guy and Matt Reeves' attention to detail in like implanting references to the original without them being gratuitous or like interrupting the flow of the story. Like, they're so organic, these examples of homages and nods to the original film, where I didn't even realize they were doing a reference until I watched the film. Like, it was just so organic to the story. I would have never thought of it as like, oh, they're going out of their way to pay homage to the original. And then having watched the original, it's like, wow, I can really appreciate they really care about this series.
100%. Also, we should say, so it was Rupert Wyatt, and it's written by Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver, who will continue to be writers on the next two, even when Matt Reeves takes over. And I think Matt Reeves on the next two also had a co-writing credit. I think he was involved in the process, but the same writers were consistent across the three, which is probably why there is such a level of dedication to maintaining an internal story as well as tying into Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, and I guess we're saying, like, I attributed that to the directors a lot, but it's really like these writers.
I think these writers are complete Planet of the Apes nerds.
Yeah, they have to be.
Yeah. I'll second what you said. I started by watching this, not the whole trilogy, but Rise and Dawn. It were the only two Planet of the Apes things I had seen, and I also was fucking head over heels about it. Like, as you guys know, though, like, I am a big sci-fi dystopian nerd, so I was very much into it. And then that's when I went back and sort of watched the original, and like, as I alluded to in the intro, like, they devolved pretty quickly into complete nonsense. Fun nonsense, but nonsense. But after having watched the first one and then going back and like rewatching the whole trilogy, I just was like, I'm like, I can't believe this exists, because it is the best prequel trilogy ever, hands down. But it also perfectly functions as a trilogy, and also to where, like, whether it's my mom or my sister who don't give a shit about sci-fi, or Maddie who really doesn't give a shit about sci-fi, who all really liked it because it just functions well as like a story. And to your point, Carol, like, it is absolutely not fun. Like, I can see that point. It's not fun. It is very disheartening. But what I really appreciate the most, and I think after this rewatch, I should also say, this is one of those trilogies that every time I go to watch it, I'm expecting myself to have the fake reaction I had. Where I'm like, I'm expecting this to be the time when I'm like, actually,
maybe these aren't
untouchable. And then I watch it and I'm like, I like it more, actually. I like it even more this time.
On that note, I think, like, I'm pretty sure we both agree on this. This is like one of our like perfect trilogies in the world.
Yes. In terms of just its internal consistency and the like, character arcs paying off, handoff from one movie to another.
It arguably gets better with each movie. I mean, our opinions always change on which one is our favorite.
We'll talk about that too. But yeah, no, I mean, I just think it's just crazy. And then not to mention, like, we haven't even talked about the pioneering for visual effects. Like,
oh my god,
Andy Serkis' performance in this, like, the fact that you can have like these genuinely heart-wrenching emotional moments with Caesar.
CGI apes.
And not even to mention that, like, that starts happening in Rise, which is from 2011. And then by the time you get to these new ones, and we even said, it's like you watch Rise and you're like, wow, it's gonna look better than this?
How is this the worst looking one?
Yeah, and then you get to the next one and you're like, fuck. And then you get to the next one and you're like...
I'm just watching, like, live action apes.
This is photorealistic at this point. It's so cool. But, and this is sort of the larger arching thing, and then I guess we can go sort of one by one, but, like, what I really appreciate is... The first one, the original Planet of the Apes, was made in 1967, right? And it's based on a French novel, like I said, from a little while back.
It's French?
Yeah, I'll go pull it from the shelf.
1963 by Pierre Boulle.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of the themes in that are not dated, but specifically relevant critiques of the time, which... So, like I mentioned, it's a lot about, like, violence, because we're coming out of world wars. We're coming, like, out of the nuke era, which is why the whole movie, it ends with him being like, fuck, you literally blew up the world in a nuclear war. This is, like, our biggest fear right now. It's a lot about space travel. It's a lot about religious dogma, because that's, like, a lot of what was going on at the time, which is still going on.
Cold War stuff.
Cold War stuff. Like, it's a lot of those themes. It's a lot about subjugation, which is probably because, like, the 1960s was a big era for civil rights as well. So there's, like, those themes in it. So it's very, like, specifically those themes. But what I really like about this new one is that And to your point, it's very dystopian, Carol, but it's the next step further of like, no, we're beyond like the apes before were like, these are our specific flaws, and the apes in the new ones are like, this is about societal collapse. This is how a society is structured in a way that ultimately leads to its downfall, even with the best of intentions. And I love that. And I love that, I mean, we'll get into it when we talk about Dawn, but just like how it's like, yeah, you have all these like this initial group of like, I guess elders you could call them, that like escaped and like created this new idealistic society and have these very basic rules that should be simple to follow. But then like as new generations come in, those rules get twisted and broken. And by the end of that movie, you get the thing of like Koba saying ape not kill ape and Caesar saying Koba is not an ape, which is a hype moment, but is also like incredibly sad because that's one of those dividing lines of like society's never going to be the same again because you drew that line. And like, you probably had the right to draw that line in that moment, but this is the seeds from which you see the division of the apes in war and like leads to what you get to in the first Planet of the Apes movies, which is society that is kind of like the society we have now, which is very fragmented and fucked up society. So like it is just and like all of this is about movies about apes, dude. Like we can't like it just started as some guy.
But hey, that's the lesson. Like, don't underestimate apes.
That is the takeaway, if anything. Don't underestimate apes. But yeah, no, I mean, it is a perfect self-contained trilogy, like, technique-wise. It functions as a prequel, but then it also functions as a spiritual sequel at the same time because it improves upon the themes of the first one. It's like all these things wrapped into one. Like, I don't know how it exists.
Well, and also...
Like, I'm more in awe of it than I even enjoy it. I'm just like, how did you... like pull all this off at once.
And also, so in your intro, you're talking about like the shitty sequels, and the plot of one of them is like Caesar going back in time and like starting the Planet of the Apes. Like
yes.
it's like a retroactive prequel, I guess.
Yes, but differently, so things end up better.
So in that way too, this could kind of be thought of as a sequel if it's just like,
yeah.
I mean, there is no time travel in these movies, but it's like the same idea as that sequel.
Yes.
Then this could be subliminally classified as a sequel in that very specific sense as well.
100%.
So just like there's like so many angles that you can look at these movies, and it's like, wow, it's successful from this angle, like, and the fact that this was made by a huge studio.
I know, that's
with
the other
this
thing.
much respect for the material. I feel like you just never see this.
Well, this reminds me a lot of how like Nolan got to make Batman Begins because Batman and Robin existed. Like I think Planet of the Apes was so fucked because like all the sequels were bad, and then Tim Burton's movie was not well received, that they were kind of like, oh, you want to make a serious drama about an ape prequel?
Fine,
sure, whatever, do whatever you want.
It,
And then it worked, and they were like, oh, okay, then maybe you should continue making these movies.
Ironically, it was a different director from then on. But
yeah, true. But I think Rupert Wyatt was supposed to do it, but there was like a legitimate conflict where he couldn't. And so Matt Reeves like stepped in.
Well, because I do research, I know why.
Hit us up, Carol.
It's because the studio gave him like a firm, like the movie has to be done and ready to release on this date. And he was like, I don't think I can make the movie I want by that date. So they're like, okay, we have to go in another direction. And then they hired Matt Reeves. And funnily enough, he basically went and changed the entire story of the script and still... didn't make it on time, so they pushed the release by 2 months.
Nice.
So I wonder how we felt about that after. But
I would love a little time portal just to see if Rupert Wyatt continued his version of it, because I mean, to say it would be better or worse, like who knows? Yeah. But I do think like Rise, I still enjoy on every rewatch, and I kind of would be interested to see like what the different direction is, even though the direction they took I also love. Like it's sort of like you can't go wrong.
I have a bit of information about what the original script included.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Just from IMDb or wherever, but it said, according to director Matt Reeves, the original draft of the screenplay, which was written before he was hired, was set further in the future, with the apes having obtained the ability to speak almost flawlessly, and Caesar playing a much smaller role. Reeves thought it would be more interesting to explore Caesar's story at an earlier age, and then asked for permission to rewrite it, which he did.
Okay, for the record, I'm glad that we got what we got, because
that sounds better.
The other one seems like it wouldn't have been as Caesar-centric as like a trilogy, like a character study on him. And on that note, I do, in like a hypothetical world, I think it would be interesting to have, I don't want this, but if the last two movies were directed by different people so that every one of the 4 core Planet of the Apes movies, like these prequels and the original, have been directed by someone else. Again, like I'm glad that, for the record, what we got is what we got. But just in like a parallel universe, that would have been interesting to see, because even now, I find it really interesting how each one of these movies was a very unique experience.
Yes.
Like the first one is like pure sci-fi. It's like a Star Trek episode.
Yeah,
like
I think that's why I love it so much. Yeah.
And then Rise is this nice little kind of slow build origin story. Dawn is like the most of an action movie out of all these movies. And then, at least in my opinion, and then War is just, it's kind of like this Western swan song almost.
Yeah, it's like a prison escape.
And a little bit of a heist movie, yeah. So they all have this different like vibe and unique experience where that they don't feel like they stagnate at all. Like for me, they don't get tired with each entry. Like, okay, let's get this last entry done. And it's like, I've had enough of this. Like each one for me is a different experience where they each bring something unique to the table.
Because they're not... I think part of that is changing out the humans. So, like, let's do some examples right now of what we mean. So, like, unlike something like Transformers, where it's like Shia LaBeouf for 3 movies, or 4,
Honestly,
however many he did.
great movies. All awesome.
Yeah, okay, sure. I'm sure, yeah.
I've never seen them.
I saw the first 2, and I've
recently
never seen any.
rewatched the first one, and it's almost unwatchable. It's so bad.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. Surprised.
Wait, would you say they're at least consistent?
No.
Oh wow, they're not even consistent.
Perfect.
Nope.
No, but like so in those ones the human cast is always the same, so you're kind of like forced
until
to
the fourth
live
one.
in until the 4th one. Sure, the original trilogy.
The Mark Wahlberg reboot.
Yeah. Soft reboot because technically it's in the same universe.
Yeah, whatever.
But like you're forced to always be within, you're constrained by the human side of it, whereas in this you're not. So like for example, if James Franco had to be in all 3 movies, then in Dawn, you can't get, like, the overgrown society of San Francisco. You don't get that really awesome moment where he goes back to the house. You can't do War at all. It would be... you know what I mean? So that's a part of it. The other thing is, when you look at it compared to other traditional sequels, like... Just going to put this out there. I mean, we love the Marvel movies, but you look at something like Ant-Man 1 and Ant-Man 2. Ant-Man 2 is still a very good, enjoyable movie, and I love Ant-Man. I love both Ant-Man movies. I think they're great. But it's very much just, like... another Ant-Man movie, whereas these all feel like very unique, specific things. Like you said, like Rise is an origin story. It's like Batman Begins for apes. Like it is literally that. And then Dawn is like this weird Shakespearean drama, and then War is like Apocalypse Now but with apes. So like they're all very distinct.
Apocalypse Now.
Yeah,
actually,
I was
which
gonna say,
is literally in the movie.
Like, did you say that for a reason?
Oh no. It is startlingly clear. Like even the beginning of the plot of Caesar being like, I'm going on this journey to kill this guy. That is the plot of Apocalypse Now. The guy, Colonel Kurtz style, shaving his head, being real fucking weird.
He's got a cult following him, yeah.
He's even shot like Marlon Brando a little bit. Like there's times where he's coming in and out of shadow and the shadows. And I was like, okay, so it's Apocalypse Now, but with apes. Like and / Moses. It's Apocalypse Now and Moses, but with apes. Yeah, they're very unique entries. And then it's not just, like, the same movie again. Mm-hmm. But I will say, because you were saying, like, how nice it is to have Caesar have a character arc. I agree. The only way I think you could have done it without doing it that way would be if you took really big time jumps to where it was, like, the first movie was about Caesar, the second movie is about another person, like, Caesar has died off,
his
and then
son,
the third movie, maybe his son, maybe the third movie is about, like, even the next generation after that. So each movie's about another generation. Like, that could have hypothetically worked, but just having a Caesar that's, like, a side character in the second movie, I feel would not work. Like, you would need to, like, be, like, definitively we're replacing the humans and Caesar in each one. But I also prefer the fact that we just gave Caesar a character arc.
Yeah,
I mean, cool.
I like that we got as much development for him as we did.
Me too.
Although that would be an interesting idea in this or anything of a trilogy where, like, the first movie, the protagonist is this character. The second movie, the protagonist is, like, their child. And the third one is, like, their grandchild.
Yeah, it's cool. That's part of the reason, you know, there's a TV show on Apple Plus right now called Foundation. I don't know if you guys have seen trailers for it.
I've never even heard of it.
Nope.
Okay, it's based on my favorite sci-fi book trilogy. It's more than a trilogy. They expanded to it, but the original story is a trilogy.
What is it?
It's called the Foundation Trilogy. But it's cool. And it's not actiony. It's very much just like The West Wing in space.
Nice.
And this show just looks like an action adventure show. So I was like, you fucked it up. Very good.
Oh.
I'm glad that you didn't care. But that show that book is a similar concept where it's like it has segments, and in between segments you're jumping generations into the future. So that can work, and it's fun. It's a fun device, but they were just able to do so much with Caesar.
Yeah, the emotional arc was so much stronger than it would have been if you jumped generations like that.
Correct. And I love Caesar's little emotional arc because I thought it was very good.
I think he's great. I think he's one of my favorite protagonists in like modern cinema that I've seen.
Okay, and you know what? Just to give some context, and I'm not taking back any of my opinion. I still did not enjoy watching these upon this watch. But I will say, like, it might just have been the time in which I watched it, because like it was finally getting warm outside, and I think I was just like resenting the fact that I like had to be in the house for like 6.5 hours or however long the runtime of this whole series is, and I was just like,
wait, did you watch all these in one sitting?
Oh god, no. I watched
that would have been
oh my god, you guys are gonna be a little mad probably, but I watched the last one in like 4 separate parts across like 2 days.
Wow. You watched you didn't even split the Lord of the Rings movies into that many segments.
I know. Well, listen, now I've been doing this for a while. I know realistically what I have time for and what I don't, okay?
Fair enough.
But yeah, so I think that might also have played a little bit into my opinion of it. Because, like, even when I was doing the research right before this and reflecting on the story throughout the 3 films and, like, forgetting that it's about apes who I don't care about, I do find, like, that impressive and really compelling and, like, emotional. And I did, like, respect that thinking about it from outside of, like, watching all of these hours of apes fighting each other. So I will give it that.
So, well, and to add on that in a couple ways. First of all, you've also talked about the fact that just animated movies in general, you don't necessarily, like, get hype about. Because you have that disconnect. So I can understand why a movie about entirely CGI characters, or mostly CGI characters, there'd be a level of disconnect there. So that makes sense. But also, to your point, like, I don't know if by the end of it I necessarily... how much I enjoy watching. Like, there are moments I enjoy. As like, that's a
again?
cool...
No.
I feel like I'm not going to trust anything even, like, vaguely negative about
and I agree with this. It's like, I don't go into these looking for action movies. Like, I go into it looking for, like, the plight of these apes. Like,
me too.
It's like a saga.
Yeah, it's an epic. It very much comes across like an epic.
Yeah.
And I don't... And so, I mean, to talk about, like, which ones are our favorites or not, like, you had said, like, potentially it gets better with each one, and probably after this rewatch.
Depending on what mood I'm in, yeah.
Yeah, depending on what mood you're in. And for me, I feel like Dawn hits the sweet spot for me because I think Rise is actually, for me, the most watchable because it's just an origin story. So it very much has that driving momentum of, like, we're building and we're hitting, like, the classic origin story beats of, like, we were here and now we're doing this and doing that. And so when you get to the end and they're on the building and he has the spear, when the spear comes through and then they fucking hand him the other spear, like when the horse comes and he like flips up on the horse, like, I mean, that is like so enjoyable.
Just that whole bridge sequence.
It's so good.
That's like pretty much the only action sequence in the movie,
yeah,
I think.
Rise basically has no action.
Yeah,
like, it is
except
mostly,
for that finale.
Which is well built to. Which is why I think that one might be my most enjoyable, whereas I think War, I can probably say objectively, like, is the best in terms of its theming and, like, even the overall filmmaking quality. But I think that's why I like Dawn overall is my personal favorite, because it kind of has the best of both worlds for me. Like, I enjoy watching it enough, but there's also that, like, Matt Reeves, like, incredible filmmaking in there as well. So it's kind of like the nice little bridge where, like, even, like, War is just heavy. Like, that one is heavy for me, where I'm watching it and I'm like, oh my god, this is...
Why split
like,
it up so much?
Yeah, like, it's totally understandable. Yeah. I do get that.
That's why I'm always so torn, though, because I love heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, Dawn is so tight.
I know.
Like, the script is so freaking tight.
I know.
That I can never... It's like a Lord of the Rings situation, and we talked about this when we watched. It's like, when I'm watching through the trilogy, it's like, okay, Dawn is definitely my favorite one, and then you get to War, and it's like, no, is this one actually my favorite one? Like, I can never decide. It's always between those two, and Rise is also amazing, like, but it's very much the Fellowship of the Ring for me, where it's always my least favorite compared to the other two.
Yeah.
But yeah, for those other two, I can never... I'm always, like, wish-washy on which one I would actually put at number one. And it's just, whatever mood I'm in, really.
Yeah,
would be my favorite
it's
one.
totally... Yeah, totally makes sense. Carol, I saw you nodding when I said that Rise was the most watchable. Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, I went also on my phone to double check what I rated everything on Letterboxd to confirm that I still feel the same. Yeah, I agree. Rise is definitely the most watchable, and I think for me specifically, it was because it was less than 2 hours long. Love that.
True.
And I think just the fact that James Franco was in it made it feel like lighter. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like also like because there was just less fighting, as you guys mentioned, until that bridge scene. Just the whole movie kind of flies by. And yeah, I don't know what else I was. Oh, and also Baby Monkey, that helps too. Ape, sorry.
Yeah,
and then
it does.
But Dawn is the one that I rated the highest on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
Even though if I had to like rewatch one, it would probably be Rise. I do recognize that Dawn was probably like the best, quote unquote.
It's pretty, I think what it comes down to for me with Rise as well, part of why I find it so rewatchable is because it does have my favorite human character arc. So, like Caesar has a phenomenal arc in each of the movies, so that's never an issue for me, and, like, the whole ape society does. But I think as you go on, the character stuff for the humans gets a touch weaker. Mm-hmm. I still think Dawn is a nice middle ground of, like, it's pretty strong. By the time you get to Ward, it's just kind of, like, the crazy general. And, like, I mean, he's got some character stuff, but it's also, like...
Well, I want to talk about that, though. I think it's very much on purpose.
Like, I think so, too. I 100% agree. Like, it's intentional... But I think that's why I like Rise, because Rise feels the most like James Franco, who I don't particularly like as a person, but like has a lot to do. And like John Lithgow's performance as his dad is really great as well. And like that's a very touching and sad story. And then there's also the poor neighbor who just keeps getting shit on.
He also is such a grumpy guy.
Okay, but
he's a dick.
If you had an ape living next door to you, you would probably also be a grumpy person.
Okay, but I'm also not going to try to attack him.
Fair. No, fair. That is fair. I mean, he's definitely... Remember when he's got his fucking muscle shirt on and his baseball bat?
Yeah.
He thinks he's so cool. Yeah. Yeah, he deserves what's coming to him. But I think part of why Rise...
He's the downfall of the entire world, basically.
He deserves that.
Actually, here's a hot take. I think that post-credit scene should be in the movie.
Me too.
It shouldn't be after... It shouldn't be missable, like,
because it's so important.
It is very important.
You know that's a Marvel thing. It's just because the MCU was in full swing.
Yeah, this
and
is
they
2011.
Were like, But I 100% agree that should be the last scene of the movie.
It should be within the actual movie.
Yes, it's important.
Just real quick on this note of, like, we're talking about the human characters right now. I think I don't know if I'd have it any other way, to be honest, because I like how the first movie has such a, like, it focuses on, like, James Franco and John Lithgow as much as it does. And it's almost like that movie is half and half split with the humans and the apes.
Yeah.
And then the fact that percentage shifts more and more with each movie to just apes dominating the entire movie, it basically mirrors what's happening to the world in the world of these movies.
Yeah.
So I think, I definitely think that's why they did it, and I think it was probably for the best, even though you're right when you say, like, the human characters are the strongest in Rise. Like, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I think that's by design.
I agree. I think it's 100% intentional.
But also the interactions between the humans and apes get more and more violent, which also, like, I'm sure mimics the opinion as the world goes on.
And it's also, I think, important to do that because... So we talked a little bit about how Rise is sort of a perfectly self-contained prequel. Like, you could just watch Rise of the Planet of the Apes and then watch the original Planet of the Apes movie, and it's like everything lines up.
And you can just fill in the gaps of, like, over thousands of years that's led to that,
But the only thing that I think very specifically is driven home a little bit better, outside of, like, there's very random specific things that the rest of the movies do, which we'll talk about, but, like, the biggest broad thing that I think it does is really lay the foundations for why there would be this, like, deep resentment towards humans, because there's, like, the battle in the first movie, and the apes are kind of like, oh, they get hosed in the cages, and, like, it sucks. Like, obviously the humans are kind of shitty, but at the end of that movie, you're kind of like Caesar has clearly shown them a different way to be, and, like, was, like, friendly towards James Franco, but I think, the humans being more and more hostile, and by the time you get to the last movie, like, every human they interact with is straight up someone trying to kill them.
Yeah.
Like, I think really helps to lay the foundation of believing that these are apes that, you know, thousands of years in the future will be putting humans in cages and treating them like animals because that is, that's the natural progression of what
Payback,
happened
baby.
there. So, yeah, very much so, very much so.
So here's actually, okay, before I said I don't really have anything bad to say about these movies, one thing I do have to say about these movies is their titles are all wrong.
For what's happening in the movie?
Yeah. And this has been said before, but Rise should be Dawn.
Yeah.
And Dawn should be War. And War should be Rise.
I don't know if I would say War is Rise. Because, like, they don't really rise until, like, the very, 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 very end when the humans are all covered by an avalanche.
I think you could do Dawn as Rise, because it's, like, the beginning.
Yeah.
And then so Rise is the second one?
Rise is the second one and leave War. Or put War as the second one and Rise as the last one.
That's what I said.
Oh.
That's exactly
what you said. So what you said is correct.
I think Rise could be the second one, because, like, in the end, they do beat kind of the humans, like they survive.
Rise could also be the second one.
Yeah.
I guess Rise could be either one except the one that it actually is.
Yeah. So basically what we're saying is any order
Incorrect.
except the one that it's in.
Yeah.
I do appreciate though that they have never changed the title scheme. Like it's always like the original was Planet of the Apes and it's always been something Planet of the Apes. Like beneath the battle for, escape from, conquest of, whatever. Like their Rise, like they kept the theming, and they also kept the same like title font treatment for all of them, which makes me happy because I like that title font treatment. And
it's iconic.
Yeah, it's iconic. Why would you not do that? Okay, so Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Here is one thing I do have to say about negative, because you said a small negative, which is like the titling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A small negative I have is that by virtue of the fact that there's the most human characters in this one, some of them are caricatures, including the boss, who is a famous actor now. Good for him. But is literally just like, we gotta get the profits. What are we gonna do to get the profits?
Yeah.
I gotta make money. And I was like, okay.
He is the worst part of that movie, yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately, James Franco's girlfriend, because you know that they were like, oh, but like she's a female doctor, like that's so progressive, and she's gonna like at the end she's gonna like run over here so that way James Franco can get through the bridge, and then that way she'll be a part of the story. And I'm like, no, she's kind of just James Franco's girlfriend the whole movie.
I'm pretty sure she has like 5 minutes of screen time in the whole movie.
It's almost like, why even have him have a girlfriend?
Yeah.
That's to the level
or the
of
hints
like,
of jealousy you see from Caesar. That's literally it.
There is that one moment where it actually felt like it had a purpose, but other than that, like I think they could have written around that a little bit.
Just write that down. That's sort of one minor criticism, but I love the rest of the movie for the most part. So
I will say I mean, other than the fact that I just didn't enjoy it, but like a neutral criticism, because after at the very beginning of the movie, when the treatment works on one primate, the fact that after that, James Franco's like, it's ready for human trials. No science has ever worked like that.
No,
they make you try it on, like, millions of animals before you could ever even bring up the idea of human trials.
Absolutely,
so
absolutely.
That was a pet peeve. Like, the second he said that and people were considering it, I was like, no fucking way. Like, someone would sue them immediately. Like, it goes against so many regulations.
Yeah, and it very much has Spider-Man 1 vibes of like, sometimes in science risks have to be taken.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, that's the opposite. Like, that is the opposite of science.
So
I totally
many
agree. I totally
things
agree
in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
It's a shitty situation. Well, because it's sort of like, you couldn't have them have done a ton of ape trials because then there'd just be a bunch of smart apes. But then, like, why even have him pushed to do... Like, he could have just been presenting his research to be like, could we do more ape trials? And then, like, this crazy ape crashes, and they're like, no, we can't do more ape trials.
Yeah, true.
Like,
yeah, because the human trials never actually, like, happen.
No,
so
and also, like,
silly.
Even if you do that, he can still take the vial and go give it to his dad. It's not like he doesn't have to be so close to human trials that it's like, oh, maybe I'll take the risks to give it to my dad. It's like, nah, he could have just done that anyway. Like, it doesn't have to be.
Because the reason he gives the drug to his dad is because it's a last resort anyway. Like, he's not...
Yeah.
He doesn't really have any other options to begin with.
Correct. I like that undercurrent, though, and this is part of why it's my favorite human stuff, is just him being so into the specific type of research because it's what his dad struggles with. And, like, you even see a little bit at that board of directors meeting, like, his hype levels about it, about, like, this is what we're going to be able to do, and you're kind of like, okay, whatever, he just thinks he's a cool scientist. But then when you get the context of his dad, it's like, oh,
when he goes home. And I like that reveal, too.
Yeah.
At first... I think the first time I watched this movie, I thought she was like a babysitter for a kid.
Yeah.
Because you hear the shitty piano playing in the background, and you're like, oh, does he have like a child or something? And it's to reveal that he has a father with dementia.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice touch. It is a nice touch. And also, I like that it sticks to the theme that I think is prevalent through a lot of these movies, which is nobody's trying to do the wrong thing, necessarily. Like, everyone thinks they're doing the right thing at all times. And, like,
Yes.
they're not,
Except
actually.
for CEO Boss Man.
Well, except for the CEO Boss Man. But, like...
and the neighbor.
Oh, well,
yeah,
I mean, he's just a comedic. Yeah,
I know.
He's the deep one.
I was just joking.
But,
The Zed plot.
the Zed plot,
It's a very important plot, though.
But I actually kind of appreciate the fact that this running
Not
joke
important enough to be
Turns
in the movie.
into what brings on the end of the human race. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
It is funny.
When we were watching this movie, we were like, wow, this really is... Like, this has the energy of Batman Begins.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a good prequel. It's also just a good movie. Like, if you had no knowledge of Planet of the Apes
Correct.
and you watch this movie, it's just a really cool movie about this, like, ape rebellion.
It's just a sci-fi movie. It's
Yeah.
so cool, and I think that's why it's been so effective, again, showing it to people that wouldn't give a shit, like my mom or, like, Madison, who are, like, begging me to not watch this movie. They're like, can we watch anything else? And I'm like, trust me. And I put it on, and they're like, oh, like, I get it. Because it's really just about, like... I'm not saying this as a joke, but it's just a coming-of-age movie. And I know this has become a meme in our friendship group, because I think a long time ago I described Thor as a coming-of-age movie, and we all thought that was
The
funny.
first one?
Thor
Yeah.
is a coming-of-age
It
movie.
is, but I remember when we were doing a rewatch leading up to Age of Ultron, which feels so funny to say doing a rewatch, because that's like 5 movies.
Yeah.
But we were like, yeah, let's rewatch to lead up to that, and we watched Thor, and we were like, oh yeah, it's a coming-of-age movie. This is a coming-of-age movie. It's just about a kid that, like, leaves home. Basically, is what this movie's about. It's very
and it's
relatable in that way.
It's a kid that learns how shitty the world is.
Yeah, yeah. It's a kid going off to college. Kinda. And just to talk about also, like, with Caesar's arc, and I think part of what makes that so good is the writing, obviously. Part of what works is just the incredible performance from Andy Serkis, who, again, like, I understand that the Oscars are very, like, we can't nominate a motion capture performance because, like, there's animation involved. But, like, between this and Gollum, I'm like, dude, like, this guy's acting his ass off, like, to get across what's happening in these scenes. Like, you gotta, like...
And you can't even see his face.
But, like, the emotion comes through. And, like...
I know, yeah.
He's incredible. Like, I don't... How could you not respect that? Or even create a different category then. Like, live-action performance versus animated performance or something.
But,
like,
I mean, I think he was recognized at a lot of other... like award venues.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it sucks that there wasn't anything at the Oscars that like fit exactly what his performance was. But I'm sure, like, you know, he knows he did a good job here.
I
know
hope.
what I mean?
I hope he does.
I would also
I'd like to believe he does.
Yeah.
Because none of these movies won any Oscars for anything.
Which is fucking baffling.
And, like, we've talked about this. In 2014... It's just unfortunate because in 2014 is when Dawn came out. That's also when Interstellar came out. That won visual effects, even though, like... Dawn easily could have taken it for the motion capture.
Any other year, it would have been the easy win.
Yeah.
But
it would have won.
Of
But
course,
weren't all 3 of them nominated for visual effects?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then
In
War
their
was in
respective
2017.
years, yeah.
And what was the one that we were like, oh, there's another big one that year that like
Blade Runner 2049.
Yes. So like again, if it was any other year,
Yeah.
it would have taken it, but it's just so unfortunate
What
that
about 2011?
Yeah, I don't know what Rise
What's the
lost to.
excuse then? Yeah.
probably
I
like
can look it up real quick.
We were in between Marvel stuff.
20 no, that was Thor and Captain America.
yeah, that's
but
Thor
I
and
don't
Captain
think either
America.
of those would have won.
No, I can't imagine them beating this for visual effects.
All I was going to say is it really is just a timing thing, I think, of why.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. The other thing that I want to touch on, obviously, and it kind of relates to the performance, but and we talked about this a little bit, and it's set up in this movie and so like beautifully carried through, is just how much visual storytelling there is, because you can't have them just talk about what's happening.
Yes.
And it's one of those things, I think I've used the phrase before, but like deceptively simple, where like you don't even think about it necessarily, but when you actually pay attention to it, you're like, wow, like the fact that you're able to pull this off in a way that feels natural is insane. Because like so many people are so bad at visual storytelling that it's just like, it's incredible. And it's, again, like by the time you get to Dawn, where the first 20 minutes of that movie is just sign language.
Uh-huh.
And it's like perfectly compelling. But again, it starts with this, with something that's so perfect, that's never like the window, the use of the very distinctive window, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I love. I think that is wonderful. It leads to, like, for my money, the most emotional scene in the whole movie. When, like...
Yeah, I was gonna say that's, like, very smart. I never would have thought to have that. Like, that was, like, pretty genius.
It is genius. And also, they never do the thing where, like, Caesar walks out of the frame and they linger on the window for way too long to be like, this is important. It's just, like, it's so natural. He's just there by the window. You see him being there by the window. It's an afterthought. And then when you get to the thing and he draws the window, you're like, oh, that's so sad. And then when he erases it, you're like, fuck!
Yeah. You think about him living in that attic for all those years, like, he's looked out that window so many times. It's so important to him.
Now he doesn't even have a window.
That's his home.
Yeah, now he's in a cage, yeah.
And again, to not have to say anything. Because again, we actually introduce an ape that understands sign language. And in a dumber movie, he just would have been like, I miss my home. Or like, I don't want to go home now. But it's like, it's so smart and poignant to just like, he just draws the window and he just lays his head against it. And it's like, you know exactly what that means. And then when he erases it, you know exactly what that means. Fucking, it's so like simple in thought, but so incredibly hard to execute.
Also, in 2011, it lost to Inception.
Okay, well, we can't win. It's literally like no matter what
luck.
we do.
Wait, but that was 2010.
Oh yeah, you're right. So Kara, look up the 2012 Oscars. That's the year that it would have been nominated.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh gosh.
Because the Oscars are always 1 year later. Yeah,
I still can't think of what it would have.
I don't even know what came out in 2011.
Sorry. Hugo won.
Oh.
Oh, okay. I can see that.
I get it, but like,
Really?
I mean, that's all animated, isn't it?
It's not all. It's very CGI
or like CG heavy.
Yeah.
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 All right, that's fair.
That's fair. But
Anyway, it's just again unfortunate that all three of these movies were in such divisive years for CGI. So I love how Koba in this movie, like while this whole ape rebellion is going on, he's very focused on this one guy that he like that's like his nemesis of going after. Like in the bridge scene, there's the whole rebellion, and then he's like, I want that guy.
Yeah.
Like, he's mine, no one else touch him.
Mm-hmm. It's so cool.
But he's also so sympathetic.
Yeah, well, because, and again, to your point, it's like, what you don't know, like, you don't know in Rise where it's going to go, but all you understand him being, like, this aggressive force because of the fact that, like, you see, and they even have the line about, like, oh, this guy, like, he knows about being in a lab, like, he's been in a lot of labs, and you see he's got the scars on him, which obviously will come back later to better effect. But yeah, in this, it's just... He's very much just Caesar's, like, general, which also...
Well, in this, he functions as what Caesar could turn into if he's not careful.
Yes, exactly.
That's what he functions as in this movie.
Yeah, the other side of it. One of the things that I also like about what Rise does with its use of the apes is setting up... We talked about this, but in the original Planet of the Apes, even within the ape society, there is distinction in class between the types of apes.
Yes.
So, like, the orangutan apes are, like, the...
Scholars, the priests or whatever.
Yeah, sort of like the leaders, and then there's like the gorillas that are the warriors, and then there's the chimpanzees, which are like the scientists and like I guess like normal class of
working
apes
class,
or whatever,
yeah.
working class apes. And you kind of see that a touch here because like Maurice, who is one of the squad. Also, I think part of why this movie's so watchable is because it literally is the getting the team together movie, and that team stays consistent through, which is so cool. But
I love Maurice.
Like Maurice he's the first ape to be smart, which makes sense because those types of apes were the scholars in the original, but in this one he already knows sign language. So it's like that's a fun little touch, but it also sets up the idea that there may be like these differences. Then you have like the big gorilla that's obviously like the muscle. Basically the muscle of the group.
Yeah.
And so Koba kind of falls into that as well as sort of like falling into one part of society. Whereas I think Caesar represents like if everything went right, which we know it's not going to go right, like it would be just like Caesar of like a well-rounded utopian person.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting because Koba isn't a chimpanzee.
No, yeah.
That's true.
So he's his own
bonobo, or however you pronounce it.
Bonobo. Yeah. Yeah, no, they definitely play with that, some of the specifics of it. Those are some of the, like, really tiny details that they don't follow exactly. The other thing is, like, I'm sure, I don't know if you remember in Rise, Carol, but, like, they have a few shots of, like, the astronauts going up into space. And then, like, there's a newspaper heading that's, like, the astronauts are now lost in space. That doesn't technically line up timeline-wise, because in the original movie, they went up to space in the 70s. Like, so you have to kind of like jump that into the future because of time.
Well, but
like
we made the argument, and like we don't know if this is actually how it was intended to be, but it could have been like the footage that you see them showing of the astronauts looks old, so it could have been archive footage that they're like, here's looking back at when the ship launched in the 70s, and then it's because you find out later in the movie we don't know where they are. Like, they're lost.
That's true. The newspaper headline just says lost, lost in space.
So like, I'm just gonna keep it headcanon that it's still how it happened in the original movie. Like, the launch was in the 70s, but we have no, like, we can't track their location anymore. We don't know what happened to them, and then it leads to thousands of years later.
That would be cool. I like that as headcanon as well. Yeah, we should just touch on, I think, some of the like the jail cell for Caesar hypeness, with just like Draco Malfoy being there, being a piece of shit, and just all that. The way he like teaches that he slowly starts to teach them, I think is so cool.
Also, the dad from Succession is the like owner or whatever of the zoo,
sanctuary.
Yeah.
Sanctuary
it's
seems
definitely
incorrect.
Yeah, well, sanctuary.
Air quotes.
Yeah.
I like, obviously, when he like cuts the canisters and he rolls the canisters to like distribute the smart juice to everyone.
Oh, and I like the smart juice. And also this is where we meet Rocket. Like, Caesar's showing him this is how it's gonna work. Like, he's showing him like, I'm the boss here, but he's also showing them you don't understand how much better your life should be outside of this shithole.
Yeah, exactly. All that stuff is so cool. Him showing them the better way, and like a lot of those teaching moments of, again, all nonverbal, which is so cool. But when he lets Rocket out and like goes to hit him but doesn't hit him, and is like, okay, like, you work for me now, like, or like I'm gonna let you be, so you let me be, however you want to read that. But then even you get the like learning scenes where he's like teaching them.
Oh, when they're all crowded around and he's teaching them how to like talk.
Yeah.
It's great. It's like Batman Begins like training montage.
It is like the League of Shadows.
Yeah.
And you also get so much cool set. Like, you get the setup here of Apes Together Strong.
Yeah.
Which ends up being a through line, like literally to the end and to the point where like when it comes up again in war, it's like so fucking hype. And then all of this leads up to, and I think like we alluded to, obviously, like the emotional stakes and like what you feel for Caesar and what he's been going through, and kind of like thought he had a home, but like he didn't really have a home. Then he gets to this new place that's definitely not like a home, but he's kind of like, I don't even know what I want. You know what I mean? Because he's kind of like, I thought I wanted to go home, but I don't. But also, like, this place sucks. And he's like,
yeah, he kind of has like the angsty teenager situation.
100%.
But then he matures. Like, he realizes what his
purpose,
his mission is. He's not just like an aimless rebel.
Yeah,
it's not annoying. Like, he
no,
has
for sure,
a directive.
For sure, he like feels the angst and then channels it.
Yeah,
but that leads to what I think we've said is like, or at least for me, is like my favorite scene in the movie because it's so fucking hype. Is you get the get your paws off me, you damn dirty ape, and then Caesar says no.
Yes.
And you just get that like 30 seconds of reaction shots to all the apes being like, oh shit, we can do this? Yeah. Like, this is what we're allowed to be?
That's my favorite scene in the movie.
It's so good. It is so unbelievably earned and good and like cathartic in the moment too. And
that's the thing too. Yeah. Like, it's like, it feels so good considering how you've seen them be treated throughout this entire movie.
Yeah, and
just that one word, no. Like, this is, we're drawing the line here. This is where the revolution begins.
Yeah, for sure. And also, it's like so much about like the themes of the movie and about like sort of even tying back to the first one about like abuse and subjugation and all that, and just be like, no, we fucking had enough. And like, yeah, him just screaming no, and like everyone's banging on the things and he lets them all out. It's so good. And it does not stop from there, because from there it just goes into straight out like
the
action
finale
movie. We're fucking up the world.
And you had a little nugget of information of the word no.
Yes, which is in the original Planet of the Apes continuity. The apes reveal, I think in movie 3, I think in Escape from Planet of the Apes, that they give a little bit of their backstory, of their history, and they say that like the first ape that ever spoke, the word that they said was no. So like that's a fun little, but again, what's so brilliant is like, even if you don't know that, it is so fitting. Yeah. But if you do know that, you're like, I can't believe you fuckers made that work in context of this.
Organically.
Yeah. It's awesome.
You just told me that when we were doing this rewatch. Yeah. Before then, I had no idea about that. Yeah. I haven't seen those shitty sequels.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just a super hype, cathartic, well-written moment.
Yeah.
And the fact that it also doubles as a really specific and also awesome homage, even if it's to a shitty movie.
Yeah.
So clever.
And also, just since we're talking about the speaking, they never go full blown, everyone can just talk.
Yeah.
And, like, the explanation they give is that, like, apes' vocal cords are different or whatever, so they would have a really hard time talking. Throughout the movies, they get progressively better at speaking. Like, Dawn, they speak a little bit more, and by War, it's like, oh, okay, like, you're almost just straight up talking to each other.
But only some, like, most of the apes throughout these movies never even talk.
Yes.
But they do learn sign.
Yes. They do learn how to communicate. But it also makes sense, because, like, if you think about it, I guess, developmentally, like, Caesar had the formula his entire life. So even as they go on, like, by the time you get into War, Caesar is just basically straight up speaking to people.
Yeah.
But a lot of the other apes still aren't, or they're, so it's almost like they're always one step behind where he is, which makes sense.
But even then, logically, the ones who do end up speaking even a few words are the ones who are kind of a part of his inner circle, which also makes sense, because then they're just around talking more.
Well, it's
especially
like,
Maurice,
Yeah, especially Maurice. Yeah. Maurice is the absolute
The actor had to wear 10-pound weights on his wrists to mimic, like, orangutan body movements.
That's wow. Yeah, so I guess we're sort of at the end of the first movie here. Basically,
yeah, it's pretty straightforward, but it's just the execution is so amazing.
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
Instead of waiting to the end to do all the
references.
Okay. I'm just gonna do them movie by movie.
Yeah,
okay?
Good idea.
Okay, so in the first Planet of the Apes, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. One of the first things we see are apes being captured by nets. This is a very subtle reference, but in the original Planet of the Apes, they use lots of nets to capture humans. So I think the nets are a reference to the nets from that movie. In this movie, in Rise, they refer to Caesar's mom as Bright Eyes. Like, that's her, not call sign, but whatever, that's her fucking nickname.
Her gamer tag.
Her gamer tag. In the original Planet of the Apes, the protagonist, Taylor, played by Charlton Heston, the apes refer to him as Bright Eyes. At one point in Rise, Caesar's playing with the Statue of Liberty, which is obviously a reference to the end of the first Planet of the Apes, very iconic twist ending. At one point in this movie, Draco Malfoy starts shouting, "It's a madhouse." That is a direct reference from the first Planet of the Apes. That's a line in that movie. In this one, they use the hose to spray the apes, which, like, when they're in the cells, that whole cell area very much parallels where the humans are kept in the original Planet of the Apes movies. They're all kept in cages because they can't speak in that movie. So they treat them like animals, and they use hoses to kind of knock them back a lot. So that's very much a visual metaphor there. One of the main scientist apes in the original Planet of the Apes is named Cornelius, and there is a ape in this named Cornelia, and that is the ape Caesar will go on to marry. So, that's obviously a reference to that as well. Okay, so I already alluded to this, but the "get your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape" line. So in the original Planet of the Apes, when the scientists crash land on this planet, they find humans that can't speak anymore. They're basically animals, and then the apes have, like, regular human society. But when the apes are hunting these humans, our main protagonist, played by Charlton Heston, gets shot in the throat, so he also loses the ability to speak temporarily. So he goes a lot of that movie being speechless, but the apes recognize, like, oh wait, this human is, like, smart. Like, why is he way smarter than all these other humans? And then at one point, there's, like, he's in a fight with apes, and the first thing that he says is, "Get your paws off me, you damn dirty ape." So that was, like, a very famous line from the original, and it also mimics the scene in this where Caesar says no, because in that scene, when he speaks, all the apes are like, "What the fuck? This human can speak?" And so it's very much the same scene, which is cool that they give the line to Draco, but then it gets paid off with no, which is also a reference to Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
This whole scene is so goddamn smart.
It's layers upon
layers.
Layers.
It's like there's like 20 layers to unpack here. Obviously, the space shuttle getting lost in space, that's very much a reference. And then I just wrote apes on horses because in the original, the apes use horses. They ride them to get around and stuff. And there is the scene in this movie that's very much that of just, like, the horse, which I alluded to, and then Caesar just pops up on the horse and is like, does a battle cry,
but also just a badass shot.
Oh, I mean, it's again incredible hype moment, but, like, if you know the context, you're like, oh, he's riding a horse. They're becoming the Planet of Apes. Yeah, that's all I had for references to that one.
The first time I watched the OG one, that was the biggest takeaway. I think was the hose is like. Because then I watched the original and then I went on to rewatch the trilogy.
Yeah.
And on, like, during Rise, when they used the hose as, like, a reference, I was like, oh my god.
It's so, like, subtle.
it's so subtle, and it's so like this is what would actually happen in this sanctuary anyway. Like it doesn't feel out of place at all, but is this inspiration for what the apes would eventually go on to like control their human subjects with, because this is how they're treated, or is it just a reference, or is it both? Like there's so many possibilities, and I have so much respect for how this story was just threaded together so seamlessly.
And I also think it's a little bit of credit to that original movie, because that original movie is doing that in reference to caged animals. Mm-hmm. And because that works as such a nice metaphor in that movie, when you get to do the reverse of it, which is actually show the way things are now, it works as a reference, but also it is 100% what happens. Because that one used a smart metaphor. So it's almost like they're just feeding into each other. Like there's so much synergy between the two movies. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, so now we move on to the two towers of the trilogy.
Yeah.
Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. This one is great because this whole movie is Caesar really, like, he kind of doubles back a little bit in that, like, he's like, am I doing the right thing here? This whole movie is kind of, you need to find balance between the Koba inside of you and the Caesar inside of you. And it's the exact same things with the humans. Mm-hmm. It's the trope of, like, we're not so different, you and I.
I know, yeah. Like, leans on the wall, pats him on the head, I think what I'm so struck by is, I talked a little bit about this in the intro, but, like, to go the route of having the metaphor be, like we're watching one society collapse, and we're watching another society begin. But in watching the one society begin, we're literally seeing the moment that will lead to it collapsing eventually the way the current society did. Which is so striking, and it's so also... And they don't shy away from this. Like, in Rise, like, Caesar is the hero. Full on, he has done literally nothing wrong in that movie whatsoever. And, like, obviously he's still...
Except he bit that dude's finger off.
True.
Oh, no, he didn't bite it off.
Fun fact about that, in the original cut... He did straight up bite that dude's finger off. But it was so... it was so grotesque that they CGI'd it so he didn't actually bite it off. And you still see that he goes like this and, like, goes to the side. Like, as if he was spitting out the finger. But they just CGI'd that out, which is kind of funny. But what I like about Dawn, and then it's same thing happens in War, is that what they give Caesar to do as a character arc is ultimately still heroic. But it, like, really plays on the idea that, like fundamentally when an institution gets large enough, like, you're going to have to make shitty decisions that no matter what decision you make, it's a bad decision. Yeah. But, like, you can do it with, like, the most moral conviction and really, like, try to do the best thing possible, but, like, it's gonna fuck things up permanently. And, like, that's what I like about Koba. Like, Carol, you said Koba being the most evil one, and to a certain degree, by the end of the movie, Koba is full-on villain, 100%. Like, he is killing apes. There's the one shot I love where he walks over to a trapped ape, picks up the thing, grabs the gun from him, and then drops the thing back on him, and it's like, okay, like, you're just a...
Well, at that point in the movie, he's just fighting for him.
Yes, and what I fucking love is that this movie is kind of a condemnation of, like, positions of power in general, because it's about Caesar and his, like, group of fucking councils, right? His little group of elders, and, like, we all escaped, and we think we know best, and we're running this society from our point of view. And Koba, at the beginning of the movie, is making nothing but valid points. Koba is like, dude, I got fucked by humans. He's like, I'm glad that you had a friend that was a human, and also, like...
We didn't all get that, like, that privilege.
You know what it reminds me of? Not to make this too real world, but, like, it very much reminds me of, like, when we talk about, like, policing being a broken organization, and someone goes, but, like... I have a family member that's a police officer and they're a good person. And it's like, no, I get that. But you need to understand that, like, the institution is broken. Yeah. And so that's the side Koba's on. Koba's like, I'm glad James Franco was a nice guy. But you need to understand that, like, the institution of humanity is broken. And Caesar refuses to listen to it and ultimately creates that division, which is, like, what leads Koba to being, like, not that radicalization is ever, like, warranted, but it's like you understand why he goes far in the other direction, because he's like, you're not fucking listening to me. They have guns. They're gonna kill us. And Caesar's like, James Franco was nice. And he's like, oh, fuck you, dude. And then he tries to kill him, which is obviously way too far. Like, that is not acceptable.
Well, there's an escalation for sure.
Yeah, that's why I called him evil. Because it was like, obviously, I understand where he's coming from. I do get humans are shit, and they tortured him, and that's not okay. But, you know, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, guys. And
No,
like
I
the
know, you're
second
right.
he dropped, I think it was
Absolutely.
Ash off that balcony
yes.
or whatever.
Yeah, R.I.P. Ash.
At that point, I was like, oh, I cannot forgive him. It's
Yes.
You're absolutely right. Like
Yes.
there is a point in the movie where he
Yeah.
becomes absolutely like just the villain character.
Yeah, no,
Same-
but that's what I just wanted to explain
Yeah,
my
yeah.
point of view, because me saying like just from the outset that he's evil, like I obviously do understand that he's been through some stuff.
For sure. But I think, and that like,
And the humans are more evil.
yes, but also, and I guess I never really realized it on this rewatch, but like Gary Oldman is not evil for like 90% of this movie. Like he is mostly just Koba.
He is the Koba for humans.
I mean, he very much is in the parallel, but also like, yeah, like you see both these guys that are literally just doing
what they think
is right based on the information they have, and eventually just snap, and then
Yeah.
they go that one step too far, and you're like,
Well,
that
they snap
sucks.
because now they're the leader of this division that they formed.
yeah.
Yeah,
And it's like they
literal army.
don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, and they have to like double down on their commitment because it's
Or
the
else
only
they'll
way.
look like a fool.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful like storytelling device and metaphor between the two.
But I think
factions.
that's also part of why I couldn't get into it, because like all of the ape storyline so closely paralleled, like first of all history,
Yes.
which I know is the point, and like and because this is sci-fi, like this is just like the version of storytelling, which is why like maybe it's just like not the sci-fi for me. But just because it parallels real life and real conflict so much, the whole time I was like, this didn't have to be apes, and I think that's why it frustrated me so much, because it is literally just like stuff that's happened in the world, and I know
Sure.
it's supposed to demonstrate like, yeah, like it is, because the world is fucked up, and like I understand that it's this parallel, and I get that like it's great for you guys, but just the whole time for me I was like, it doesn't have to be about them, like, and also just in general, like wars
war.
like I don't know. I've never been like a violent or angry person in my life, so it's just something that like I have never been able to understand. Like the second they're like, we got to get all these guns, I'm like, it's just like I can't. I never have understood.
Yeah.
And it just frustrates me to no end.
Yeah, but I okay, so to your point, first of all, you were saying like, why does it have to be apes? That is an absolute fair point. My take is more like, I'm so glad that it got to be apes, because like if you're gonna make a movie about Planet of the Apes, we already have the silly ones, so like either make a good one or don't. And like at least they chose to make a good one, and I get it, like it is very like, we are literally talking about like societal decay and collapse in a movie about fucking apes, and I get that, like I totally get that, but like as a fan of the franchise, I am just like, well, at least you did something. Like, at least you didn't just make another Star Wars movie. At least you, like, actually tried to, like, expand beyond the horizons of what people thought this franchise could be. That's one point. The other thing I was going to say is, to your point about the whole war side of it, I agree. I am also not, by any means, a violent person. But what I like is how unbearably sad, and I get why this would not be enjoyable, like, to watch. I totally get that. But the sadness of the action scene and like the siege of the city and like they're defending it is part of what I love so much about this, because it's not glorified. Like in the first movie, it's actually to a certain degree glorified, because you're like, yeah, fuck these people, kill everyone, who cares?
More than the other two movies, for sure.
Yes, but in this one, it's very much like, it's so sad, because it's like, you know, like this is what happens. You know, like a leader gets killed and it's like a fake, and like, oh, these people actually did it, but no, they didn't, and so now we're going to go to war with them, and this other group of people is like, oh, these are just the suspicions we had the whole time, and it's like, it's sad, and you even get, again, great visual storytelling. There's just that like one teenage boy that's like fumbling around with his gun, and Gary Oldman helps him set up the gun, and like 2 shots later, he's dead. And
that
like
reminds me a lot of in Two Towers, another Two Towers tie.
Yeah.
There's the young kid who like is drafted into the battle because they don't have enough fighters.
Yeah.
And he's scared, and it's sad that this is what it's come to, but this is how it has to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, I also don't disagree with what you said about the violence. I just don't look to this movie for cool action scenes.
Yeah.
I it's like you said, where it's like, wow, this is sad that this is what it's had to come to, and I think that's the point. And that's why I like watching it, not for a cool action-packed sequence, but for like, this is the unfolding of all of the unfortunate events that have come before it.
Yeah. The other thing and this sort of leads to what you were talking about too, Kara, about like the realness of what happens with the apes in this movie, and like these lines being drawn and yada yada, and there ends up being this division between them and the assassination attempt and all that. Like it is very real, but I also think when you decide to do a prequel to Planet of the Apes, you're very much in a rock and a hard place, because you ultimately need to end up creating stories where you root against the humans. Because, like, at the beginning of the franchise, it can be this very equal, we're going our separate ways thing, and you don't really have to acknowledge it. But as you get further and closer to the apes taking over, you, in a way, have a choice to make about, like, well, are the apes going to be straight up heroes and we're rooting against the humans? Or are we going to, like, portray this as an incredibly shitty situation because once we get to the original movie, the apes aren't heroes? So, like, to have it be based in some type of real human understandable conflict, like power struggle, I think goes a long way in terms of almost contextualizing the society of the original Planet of the Apes in a way where
it's so fractured in that movie.
Because they're not just villains anymore. They're not just two-dimensional villains. It's like, oh, we're like doing something different with it. Like, because humans don't necessarily, I mean, we kind of do because, you know, we're 20 and hate everything, but like we kind of view villains or humans as villains to a certain degree because like humanity sucks. But like most people, the general populace, don't necessarily, I think, view humanity as as humans, as villains. So like to portray the apes in this way, where it's like, no, you're not going to view them as evil because they're just doing what we did, and you wouldn't necessarily call us evil. This is just the natural progression of society. But also very cool, I think, to even, I guess, ponder the question of like, does society ever work? Like, will every society eventually just collapse because eventually you get to a point where it's too big and there's too many lines being drawn that
there's too many conflicting ideologies.
Everything gets fucked. Like, does it ever actually work? Is sort of the question of this. And I guess the answer is kind of no, because by the time you get to the original, it's just as fucked as human society was.
You know what this discussion made me realize, I think?
What's that?
I think this movie, or these movies, and like their storytelling was just so successful and good that it just bummed me out too much to the point where I couldn't even enjoy it.
Yeah, because it feels too real.
Yeah, like it's too good that
that.
I was too sad, and I was just like, I'd rather not, because like you mentioned, just I'm like one of those people who just like I can't even watch the news because it like affects me too much. So
yeah.
Well,
that I think is why I was like, I don't want to watch this because it's just like what I think is happening in the world right now, but with people, and I'd rather not.
Yeah,
it reminds me of the Les Mis episode where Marco was like, the only reason I don't like this movie is because I don't watch musicals to watch a heavy movie. Like, I watch musicals for a silly movie.
Yeah,
and this movie is way too, like, I'm not ready for this narrative right now.
Yeah, that though, and I guess, there are whole subgenres of science fiction that are just like silly and fun.
Yeah.
With maybe Twilight Zone.
Like the Twilight Zone. With maybe like an undercurrent.
The Twilight Zone.
Yeah. Which is funny because this conceptually started basically as the Twilight Zone writer being like, I'm going to take your novel and just make it a Twilight Zone episode with a big budget.
I mean, the original movie is probably the most lighthearted out of all of these.
100%. And it does a very traditional sci-fi thing of just like having this, the undercurrent of the metaphor, but like, it's just like a silly...
Yeah, it's a premise.
It's a premise. It's a concept that just is just executed in a silly, fun way. But yeah, I mean, I've always loved, like, fucking make me miserable with sci-fi. Like, I love sci-fi that, like, fucking Ex Machina or Blade Runner. Like, I love it. Just,
it's
like...
the creepy dystopian... Yeah. This could be where we're headed, future.
So one of my favorite novels growing up is, and I have multiple versions of it here, is the original Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Which, funny enough, like I read the Harry Potter series in like the 5th grade, and like I read it all twice, like I think we've talked about, and then my dad was like, oh, you're into reading? Read Frankenstein. And I was like, in hindsight, I was like, why would you have suggested that? But anyway, it ended up being one of my favorites. But what's cool about in any other media, like that novel is literally just, or not novel, like the character, it's just like a monster movie. Like it's just like a dumb monster movie. But in that novel, it is like this very sad, like trying to understand death like philosophical idea that brings this person to life that didn't want to exist in the first place, and then that person has to like deal with the fact that they didn't like have consent to like exist in this way and are a monster that's trying to understand life but can't understand life. It's incredibly fucked up and sad and depressing, but like that's my sci-fi, is like make me feel like shit by the end of it.
Any human being can and has thought the exact same thoughts that character in that book thought. It's just in the guise of like a quote-unquote monster tale.
Which is exactly what I think like the best science fiction is. I mean, we just did our Interstellar episode. Interstellar is the exact same thing when you think about it. Interstellar
that's a heavy movie.
Is a heavy movie about family and loss and all that kind of stuff. And it's just through the guise of a space travel.
Black hole story.
Black hole story, yeah. But I think that one, because it's more like personal, like everyone has parents, or most people like have parents and understand a parent-child relationship. Like obviously not everyone, but like the vast majority of people. So that I think is a little bit more palatable than a movie being like the fundamentals of society are broken and it is irrevocably like impossible to ever have a functioning society. That is way more like, oh wow, okay, sure.
And I think it helps that space is just like such a wide topic that I truly believe most people can't comprehend. So that in general makes it feel less real. So it's like, oh, you know, space and faraway galaxies, that thing that I can never even really wrap my head around. Like, whatever. Sure. Let's explore that to death. Doesn't bother me because it's not my lived reality.
For sure. And also space just has this beauty to it that, like, even though it's very scary, it's also just full of wonder. Yeah. And it makes for some excellent visuals, as like we see in that movie, and pretty much any space movie. There's stuff like that to balance out the existential like horror that comes along with that subject matter. Unlike these movies where it's all very grim in where it's headed.
Just since we're on the topic of like this heavy stuff, the only thing I think on this rewatch where I almost went into your category, Carol, of like I kind of don't want to watch it, and I'm glad it was right up front, was the pandemic stuff.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because like on the one hand, good on them for absolutely nailing what a pandemic would feel like. Even just the snippets of the news report, I was like, oh yeah, this is I could turn on the news right now and hear this exact thing. Yeah. But like thankfully that's right up front and quick and over with, and I appreciate them like really nailing it, but at the same time it was like traumatic watching that. I was like, I don't want to. I hope I couldn't remember how much of that was throughout the movie, so I'm glad it wasn't. I'm glad we just did it and moved on.
But it does set up such a compelling story. Like, especially because after that, you don't even know if there are any humans left, and they're talking about how long it's been since they've seen one. Like, as, like, you know, too close as it is.
For sure.
I understand why they went with a pandemic, because it led to a really interesting movie.
And that was a cool reveal, too, because this movie, it starts, the first thing you see is that little 5-minute whatever montage of catching us up with what happened after the virus started spreading. And then the first, 10 minutes of the actual movie is just ape stuff.
Yeah.
So that when you first see the human that we're not even sure exists anymore, it is a reveal.
Yeah.
That was cool, too. But, I see what you guys are saying. Like, we can't... It's unfair to blame this movie for what eventually went on to happen in the real world.
Sure.
It's very unfortunate. I mean, it's not going to stop me from just enjoying it as, this little piece of fiction anyway. It's the same reason that, I'll continue to play the Last of Us games.
I
have
for
during
sure,
the pandemic. Speaking of which, the production design for this post-apocalyptic world is very good.
Very good.
And immersive. It looks great.
And the city part?
Yeah, that's what I mean. And it reminded me a lot of The Last of Us. Speaking of The Last of Us.
It looks just like The Last of Us. But I mean, it looks great. No shade.
There's some sort of beauty to it with how overgrown it is.
Mm-hmm. Almost like we should have more nature in cities. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
right?
I love that aesthetic of just foliage and greenery over buildings and I guess cement. Just the color combination and that overall aesthetic. I love. So,
and it also just serves, like we talked about, a nice metaphor for where we're at in the story of there's still humanity around, but nature is starting to take over. And then when you get to the third one, it's it's stark. Like you said, it's almost like a Western. It's there's basically nothing. It's sort of all snow or desert or green, but there's these little tiny little bits of so it's it all very It's almost like the people that were making these movies like thought about what they were trying to do and then executed it, which is, I know, crazy concept.
You're right, though. Like, the architecture in the third movie, it's all either military stuff or logging camp. Like, civilization is pretty much... You don't see any of that in the third movie at all.
Yes.
Yeah, it was
and
just
also
military bases.
Yeah.
And also, the only thing you do see is a defensive thing, which, like, maybe this is going even too far into it, but, like, in this movie, there is almost this, like, coexisting on top of each other. Like, there's still some stuff, but then there's the other stuff, whereas that one, it's, like, a defensive structure as opposed to, like, living structures that are coexisting with something else. So it's, like, and it just goes to even further where we're at of humanity being, like, we are now fully on the defensive, like, literally and metaphorically. So
that's what I mean. I guess what I meant to say is, like, you don't see any civilians at all. The only humans you see are, like, military people, and you don't see any residential districts of any kind. It's all martial stuff.
Yeah. I do like, though, I mean, to keep talking about sort of the ape society stuff, like, we see very clearly at the beginning they have their sort of, like, chalkboard with the rules on it, like, apes together strong, ape not
I like that they
late.
write.
Me too. I think that's super cool. I like, it's Maurice that's teaching, right? He's like the teacher, again, fitting in with them being the scholars. That's a fun little homage. But also just, like, again, to talk about the society stuff, like, yeah, it's really easy to have these incredibly simplistic rules when there's, like, 5 people. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, obviously no one's going to kill anyone. Great. That's a, you know, but, like, that's what's so cool about it. And then it leads to, like, my favorite protagonist choice that Caesar has to make, which is to let Koba die at the end because I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you logic from Batman. But, like...
Well, he kind of
He actually kind of does kill him, to be fair. But using the excuse, like, Koba is not an ape.
Yeah.
Which is cool and, like, hype in the moment, but it also reminds me, like, have you guys read... This book has been co-opted by people that don't know what they're talking about, but it's a great book. Have you guys read 1984 by George Orwell?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Well, I listened to the audiobook, but yes.
1984, and then also Animal Farm. Have you guys read Animal Farm?
No.
Okay, so Animal Farm is basically about, like, I don't know, we don't have to get into it, but it's all about, like, this farm that's had this rebellion, and they're trying to, like, make everything more equal on the farm for everyone. It's kind of about communism, but it's not really about communism as much as it's about, like, Russian communism specifically, which is, like, a different thing. Because sometimes people are, like... Anyway.
Just red fear.
Yeah, it's more about red fear. But, like, the whole thing of that... Like, the first rule they have as, like, these apes that have taken over the farm is, like, all apes are equal. That's, like, the start... Or not apes. All animals are equal. That's, like, the first rule they have.
Okay. And apes take over the farm?
No, not apes. Sorry, just animals. I meant animals. I said apes. But there's pigs, there's dogs, there's whatever. There's a bunch of different animals. So all animals are equal. It's like the first rule they have. And, like, periodically throughout the book, you keep checking back on these rules that they've created. And, like, the end of the book is they've amended the rule to say all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, or something like that. Which is, like, a very, like, heavy-handed, but, like, obvious metaphor for what happens in like, dictatorships, basically, of, like, we're all the same. Psych. Like, no, we're not anymore.
Some of us are less the same than
others. Yeah. So I very much, like, got that vibe from what happens here. And it is portrayed as, like, the morally correct decision. And, like, it is the morally correct decision because Koba is straight up fucking up people and is going to lead to mass death. But it's also, like, it's, like, the moment of which there's no coming back from. Of, like, there is no right choice. Like, if you let Koba live, there's just going to continue to be war. But if you kill Koba, then you basically have to live with the fact that you have now amended and broken what should have been, like, a plain and simple rule. But also, like, when a society gets big enough, plain and simple rules don't really make sense anymore. And so that's where that division comes from, which then leads into the next movie where there's, like, a few apes that were followers of Koba that, like, straight up just ditch the ape society because they're like, nah, that's fucked up. And even the apes that are there, it's almost like Caesar is not like a... Like, they still follow Caesar, but you can tell Caesar is almost like... He's at the outskirts. He's also just old. He's, like, old man Caesar that's, like, I've kind of, to a certain degree, lost control. But, like, if I can just get these people to this place, then whatever they do with it is whatever they do with it. But, like, I can't run this anymore. Like, I've done my best.
Yeah, I read it as, like, in the third movie, they're still... The ones that are loyal to Caesar are still... as loyal as they were. It's just Caesar, they recognize that something is now missing inside of Caesar ever since he had to kill Koba.
Yeah.
But they're, on their end, I think they're still ready to, like, back him up on... Like, they're still loyal to...
Yeah, they're still following. It's still like, we respect you as the leader of the group. But it's like,
we're waiting on you to come back from where you went at the end of Dawn.
Yeah.
Where he had to make a very tough decision.
But also, fun fact, did you know that Koba didn't actually die?
What?
The movie ends with Koba's breathing, which they did on purpose, because before they actually knew where they were going to take the third film, they wanted to have that in place just in case they wanted to further Koba's storyline at all. But then when they actually got to writing it, they're like, actually, I think we exhausted this. But writers confirmed Koba is not dead.
Well, he probably just died somewhere. I mean, in my headcanon, he died later. And
so he didn't die on camera, though. Well, it doesn't... It kind of works anyway, because in the third movie, he comes back. Even if he's not physically there, he still is tormenting Caesar in some way.
Yeah.
So whether he was alive or not...
And also, it's more about, like, Caesar's choice anyway. So, like, even if Koba technically survived and died later, it's like, okay, but you dealt the killing blow on that one. So that's fine.
But still a fun fact. And it taught him that sometimes having one person in control of hundreds doesn't work.
Yeah, and also, just sort of what you were talking about how, like, after that, Caesar is kind of like a shell of himself going forward. It is cool that Caesar in himself kind of represents the entirety of, like, where the ape society is at. Because, like, at the first one, he's, like, the optimistic, we can do this guy. And then in the second one, he's very conflicted and broken and, like, loses a part of himself. And then in the third one, it's kind of like, I'm doing my best, but, like, I'm forever changed. Like, I'm never going to come back. And, like, I think that's also sort of where the apes are. Even just the metaphor of them having to leave. Like, we have to go from this place, this idealistic... There's a lot of, like, biblical imagery in the third one, obviously. Yeah. But I think, like, one of the most obvious ones is that they were literally in, like, a garden, like the Garden of Eden, and then eventually they literally end up in a desert.
Yeah, and even... Like, obviously a forest would be way better for apes.
Yeah.
And it even makes you think, like, why in the original movie are they living in a desert?
Yeah.
Why are apes living in a desert, even at that point when they run the planet? So that's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true, though, too. Like, in the first movie, the rebellion, this ape rebellion is filled with so much, like, energy, and it's so vivacious. Mm-hmm. And by the third movie, it's like, what are we doing this for again?
Yeah.
Like, they don't doubt what they're doing it for, but they're questioning what they're doing it for, and they're like, okay, we just need to, like, we need to finish this.
Yeah.
We need to like set up the future for future generations of us, but after this, like, we need to put this to rest.
Yeah.
We need to get this done for our future generations. And that also goes along with what you guys have said of each successive movie being harder to watch in terms of like, it's less and less fun to watch.
Yeah, well, it's less and less it's less about, like, making things a better place and more like, I guess this is the best we can do.
Yeah.
Or, like, this is what we're left with, unfortunately. Like, this is where the choices have resulted, and this is where we are.
Mm-hmm. And you said, sorry, because I haven't watched any of, like, the original films.
Yeah.
In the future, when it's just an ape planet, you said they're still kind of, like, disjointed and separate?
Yeah, like, the whole society is, like, certain apes fulfill certain roles. So it's almost like you get the idea. I mean, I don't know if that was on purpose in that movie or if it was more just, like, to have variety, like, in the costuming. But people have taken it to mean that, yes, the ape society in that movie is very much like, these types of apes can only do this thing. These types of apes can only do that thing. Which also makes sense because the metaphor of that movie is that it is the current human society of the time, which is a very racist and terrible place. So, like...
Yeah, but even besides that, different apes do different things. Even when Taylor and the other astronauts get there, this society is already, like, the priest apes, I guess, the orangutans, they have their way of thinking. The scientist apes think very differently, even prior to the revelation of this talking human that they didn't expect. So it's already, like, a fractured society that we're introduced to in the original as well.
It's just really interesting because I was looking over my notes for Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and I have one that says, humans are tearing this ape family apart, assuming the apes that we see are, like, you know, a little family.
Yeah, they are.
And yeah, so then just as you guys were talking, I had a little, like, just philosophy thought train where I was like, wait, is it like if humans existed, would apes have never fractured? Like, I'm sure they would have found some other conflict, and I just like my brain really went away with it. So I wanted to see how they were doing on their own planet.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah,
I think the point is, no matter what being it is, as soon as consciousness and intelligence is introduced, this is the inevitable outcome.
Yeah, once it gets big enough.
That's another thing too, is number of population, because that's the more different ideological positions you have, the more impossible it becomes to create a world where everyone is happy.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have a ton of like reference notes for Dawn. I only had like 2. Yeah, the orangutan being a scholar. Oh, and they put humans in cages, which is just like cool.
Yeah.
They finally put humans in cages in this one, and I was like,
oh, you know what's awesome too?
I think I know what you're gonna say, but go ahead.
Is the callback of the window.
Yeah.
Of, like, that's the Caesar's son like uses that for rallying up like the rebellion against Koba. If you're loyal to Caesar, you'll know what this means.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Also, that whole interlude of like, first of all, like Koba shooting Caesar, which the first time I saw the movie, I was like, okay, Jesus
Same.
Christ. Yeah, it's cool. Like Koba manipulating Caesar's son, like that's really cool and Shakespearean as well.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, the whole interlude of Caesar, like, going back to his home.
Yeah.
And just, like, vibing there. And,
Yeah.
like, that's awesome.
The whole movie slows down for that part.
Vibing,
and it's just,
you mean like healing? Like
Yeah.
dying.
Yeah, he liked the vibes.
Yeah, I like that too. Let's take a break. There's a lot that just happened.
Yeah, we need to process.
And yeah, going into the third act, we're reintroduced to where Caesar grew up, and it's like he's rethinking everything that all the decisions he's made in the movie up to this point, and then he starts to take back his followers.
And yeah, the window. I mean, we talked about it, but it's kind of like in Dark Knight Rises when they're drawing the bat. Everyone's drawing the bat symbol in chalk to be like Batman.
And it's also like in Dark Knight Rises, everyone thinks Batman's dead, and they're like, is he back? Is he actually dead?
Yeah,
it's the same
it literally
thing with
is
Caesar.
that. Yeah, it's the exact same thing. It's so cool. The only other thing I was gonna say.
I think I know what you're gonna say.
Okay, what? Guess.
If they had revealed that James Franco was actually alive, it would have been super dumb.
Yeah, I was worried that they were gonna reveal that he was just living there like a hermit, and that like he had an underground lab underneath the house, and he was like.
even though he was one of the first people exposed to the monkeys, that would have been ridiculous.
I guess that is true. He would have died very, very.
Yeah, well, it would have been stupid if he was one of the people that was immune.
Yeah, they could have.
Yeah, I
super
guess that
coincidental.
could have been something. I have some fun facts about this movie.
Go for it.
I mean, one thing is that James Franco didn't know that footage from the first movie was used in this, so he didn't know he was in it at all, and, like, an interviewer told him at some point, and he's like, oh, I don't think they asked me if they could do that, but okay, cool. Because apparently, nice. Multiple times he said if the original director continued directing the trilogy or franchise or whatever, he planned to keep James Franco in it, so I think in general he was just bitter, but whatever.
Okay.
And also, I have, this is a very random fact, but Caesar's wife is played by Judy Greer.
Yeah.
And Judy Greer's husband is a massive fan of the Planet of the Apes, so at their wedding, they had a chimp husband and wife cake topper, and at the reception, they had the Planet of the Apes, the 1968 version, and the Rise of the Planet of the Apes, like, just playing on separate televisions during cocktail hour, which is like a whole other level of obsession.
That's fun.
Yeah, I know. Also, I just have another fact that made me chuckle. For this film, before principal photography began, the ape actors spent 2.5 weeks at an ape camp in a Vancouver studio to like learn the movements and stuff. And does that sound familiar? Does that remind you of any fantastic 2019 musical release that we maybe watched? Yeah, Cats. They all went to cat school, okay? This movie
Is there a
did
butthole
the
cut
same
of this movie
thing as Cats. So
Oh yeah, this movie and Cats are pretty comparable.
Yeah. There's the same social commentary going on.
Same social commentary, same good visual effects, storytelling,
Exactly.
cinematography.
That is my point. I rest my case.
Yeah. I do want to say, though, I remember one thing I want to say, is that this is the first one Matt Reeves directed, right? That entire battle sequence, the color palette is so much
yeah.
the Batman Penguin chase in the Batman. It's that very like orange fiery color, and there's even the shot of Koba jumping through the fire on the horse, which is a beautiful shot, but is literally the shot from the Batman exactly. And Dan and I were just laughing at that. We were like, okay, well, you've got a style, respect. It's a good style. But
and there's also, I think before that, there's a shot where like you see action through gunfire in the dark.
Oh,
This is
yeah!
also, like, the hallway shot in the Batman.
Yes! Yeah, that shot is also in this. Yeah, funny. Matt Reeves ripping off himself, but it's okay. It was worth it. Yeah, so War.
So War is essentially a Western heist movie.
And Apocalypse Now, and
Yeah.
the story of Moses.
Oh, Moses, because he's leading his people away.
He's literally leading his people away. There's also the scene where
Well,
one
but he
ape
isn't
is...
leading them. He separates. They lead themselves, and he just leads
No,
his
but
friends.
in the prison.
Once he gets to the prison, it becomes...
Sure.
Because,
So-
yeah.
Woody Harrelson is like the
Pharaoh. Yeah.
Got it.
There's even the one scene where he's like, they're whipping the ape.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, you gotta stop doing that, which is literally like something that happens in that story. So it's pretty, not on the nose. I don't want to say on the nose. That's like, it is a nice, I think, choice of allegory to use. It makes sense. I understand why you would use it. And it's not
Well,
like...
at least it's not like, at least it's Moses and not another Jesus complex.
Yeah, I mean, like, it gets a little close with the crosses, but like never...
Yeah, literally, I was like, oh, we're like crucifying people. Okay, people, apes.
The only thing though, with at least with the crucifixion thing, that is like a historical, like, Romans crucify people to kill them, and there was like
even
tons
then
of
it was
crosses.
X's as opposed to like very
I didn't.
over
you're right.
over the head.
Yeah. Exactly.
shape.
Exactly.
I didn't even see it as crucifixion. More so as just like, I've seen a bunch of things of people being tied to a post for like torture.
Sure.
Yeah.
When I say I see it, I've seen a bunch of stuff. Like in movies, not in my personal experience.
Oh,
Walking
okay.
down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not even like a crucifixion specific reference.
No, it's more of just like an old-fashioned torture. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And obviously, more than anything, it was a nod to the crosses in the original movie.
Yes. Which I'll give the full details on that in the references section.
Okay.
I have that there. But yeah, it is a nod to the original, but it very much is a torture thing. Not specifically, but yeah, like not specifically crucifixion, but evokes that idea of like the Romans torturing people, like this awful society torturing people for no reason. Or for a reason, because they weren't working hard enough for slave labor, which is an awful reason. But yeah, I mean, like we said, it's all those very much different things. I think this movie's beautiful.
Yes.
I love the choice of like the snow. Whenever a franchise goes to snow, I love it. You know, when James Bond has a snow movie, I'm like, nice. I hope the next Batman movie's in the winter.
Oh,
you know,
Batman in the Winter is great.
Batman Returns was in the winter. Bad movie, but like beautiful visuals. Like I really would love to get a new Batman in the
City.
winter. Arkham City's in the winter, so yeah. I like snow. Maybe it's because we're Canadian, but I always like whenever I see snow in something, I'm like, I know that. Snow.
Yeah, I also can't explain it, but I'd like a winter setting.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, winter's my favorite season, so maybe that has something to do with it.
Interesting.
I didn't
Winter's your
know
favorite
that.
season.
Yeah.
Nice.
I hate summer's probably my least favorite season, to be honest.
I think summer's my least as well, but I think fall's my favorite.
Summer's
Fall
also
is
my
awesome.
least favorite
Awesome.
season.
It's just too hot.
Yeah.
Fall and spring. I like fall and spring because it's like the middle ground seasons where it's like some days it's warm,
Only a
some
six
days you wear a
feels in
jacket.
absolutes. If it's yeah,
exactly.
A Jedi would choose either spring or fall.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
I guess that makes me a Sith.
Yeah, that makes you a Sith. Yeah, you're a straight Sith. Yeah, but also like so sticking with the idea of it being a Western, it's also like you go from the snow to like the desert is where they end up, and also like these big snow areas are often referred to as like deserts because that's basically what they are, just with like a different texture.
Yeah, it's a tundra.
So, yeah, tundra. Yeah, so
I remember that from grade 9 geography.
oh man, geography.
This has been this episode's geography second.
Geography second, not even geography minute. Just
We don't have enough material.
we don't have
for a
enough
geography
material.
minute.
For a full minute. Yeah, I mean that's cool, but also this movie is pretty fucked up when it starts.
Like how it starts with the colonel killing
Yeah.
Caesar's wife and child.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty
I
fucked
did not
up.
see that coming.
It's also cool. So Cornelius is the younger son.
Yes.
And then, but they set up that Blue Eyes has like a relationship with another ape called Lake. And I like that subversion because I think when I first saw the movie, I was like, oh, this might tie down the movie a little bit. It's kind of boring. But then he dies and it's up to Lake to look after Cornelius.
Yes.
Which, like, there's a kind of a neat little twist on, like, their relationship. Like, Lake looking after her dead boyfriend's little brother.
Essentially. I also like how, like, Cornelia was a reference to Cornelius from the original movie, but then when they have a son, they name him Cornelius after Cornelia. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like the whole full circle thing of like, oh, that's kind of cool that they were able to do that. So
they threaded it one layer deeper.
Yeah,
just to have,
which they didn't have to
have its own context outside of being a reference.
But I mean, it's very sad, but I also think it really like backs up the metaphor kind of, which is also so like Rocket lost his son Ash in the last movie. Now Caesar has lost his family, and it's almost like this old guard, like the original squad, they have nothing left in this society. Or it, like another way of looking at it is like the thing of like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna have kids and then I'm gonna raise them and then they're gonna like take my place in society. Mm-hmm. And it's almost the realization of like, we can't do that. Like they will never be able to take our place because the society is gonna be different. It can't be the society we grew up in. And, like, that is driven home by the fact that they all die trying to take their parents' place. But then it also makes it cool when the three of them go on that mission to be like, we have nothing left. You guys go and start your new life, your new ape society, and we're just going to go kill this guy. Because there's nothing left for us here. Yeah. Like, this is the end game. Like,
too bad they all get captured, though, huh?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's the punishment for being vengeful. It raises the question, too, of, like, can a rebellion leader have a family? Like, they're going to go after your family if you're the leader of a revolution. Yeah, exactly.
Well, and also, not to go back to Dark Knight Rises, I don't know, it's my least favorite of those, but, like, there's that line when, at the very beginning, when they're talking about replacing Commissioner Gordon, and he says, like, why would we replace Commissioner Gordon or whatever, and he's like, well, because he was, like, a wartime hero, and this is peacetime. Like, he's still patrolling every night as if we're in the middle of the gang wars. We're done. Like, we're in peacetime. Like, we're over this. And, like, that's also sort of the vibe of this, of Caesar and this old group of people paving the way and now being like, oh, there's nothing left. Like, everything that follows us now is just the consequences of our actions. It's like that TikTok audio, like, well, if this isn't the consequences of my own actions. Like, that's literally this is... Yeah, they paved this rebellion, but now, like, they are constantly living with the consequences of it. And so it's like, okay, cool... We've given up. We're never going to be able to escape the consequences. Let's just face it head on. And if we die, we die. We're also, like, basically we're expecting to die to a certain degree. And fuck it. Like, you guys go live. We fought so you can live. And we'll just go deal with the rest of this. This is all that's left.
This world isn't for us anymore.
Yeah.
But I like that we're presented with that idea in this movie. And then when they get captured, it's like, no, you were wrong for thinking that way. Like, your part isn't done yet.
Yeah.
You need to process what happened, but also realize that there's still a civilization that needs you.
Yeah.
And this is very much Caesar's swan song. It ties up his arc beautifully of, like, I was once this very... Like, I was into this revolution. I was real... Like, my whole heart was in it, and now I'm a shell of my former self. But I need to look past that and sort of reinvent myself.
Yeah.
For the sake of the last stand of my civilization.
Yeah.
I need to remind myself that it's not just about me. Mm-hmm. It's about so much more than just me, and I need to not go down the Koba path.
Yeah.
But it's funny because that's what he's doing the whole movie until he realizes that everyone's captured.
Yes.
And that's when
also, I'm not going to lie, what I did appreciate about this film is that there were a lot of twists that I did really appreciate. Like the whole storyline with now... the virus mutating and causing, like, the whole mute society that I really did not expect. Like, when we first saw those people, I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
Why is this girl who can't speak hanging out with them now? But then also that did really get me when I didn't really learn any of the apes' names except for Maurice and Caesar. So pardon me. But the big gorilla gives her the flower and then he dies.
Oh, yeah.
That was sad.
I don't blame you. Okay, that was Luca, and he was only introduced in that movie, so he wasn't someone.
But
You're fine. He wasn't.
Got me.
It is sad.
Yeah,
it is sad.
I just mean, like, I don't blame you for not remembering what his name was. I also forgot his name until I watched it.
But yeah, even like then when they do finally get to the base and then they see everyone captured, also did not expect that at all, and that really worked for me. But I do have a pet peeve, and I didn't know when to bring it up, so I just have to air it now because I don't think I'll have a better opportunity. Not that this is a good one.
Okay.
I do not believe or like the fact that these apes are still calling their romantic partners husband and wife. Are you telling me that they had wedding ceremonies and exchanged rings? You're like, no way.
So
like when he goes, "You killed my wife." Like, no, this is your partner. You're not telling me that these apes are using husband
That's a
and
good
wife.
point.
That is a very good point. The only explanation for it, not that it justifies it, I mean, it's dumb, but would just be that, like, their use of language is only from Caesar, and Caesar's use of language is only from what he learned from James Franco. So, like, them using human words to describe something that's not necessary, like, not that it is an actual husband-wife human relationship, but, like, in Caesar's mind, James Franco was probably like, when you're with someone, it's husband and wife. And so that's the words they use.
But also, San Francisco has a huge gay population.
Sure,
I do not
100%.
believe that they use partner more than husband and wife.
Sure,
Or like that they don't
sure.
use husband and wife and partner interchangeably out there. They can't set it in San Francisco and still have that be a thing.
No. It's definitely not something they consider. It's just the human bias of writing the script.
Yeah.
Like, that explanation is like a thin veil of like how you could like excuse it away. But I know what you mean. It is, well, it's just like, it's like any sci-fi thing when there's like aliens that use human language or colloquialisms, when you're like, why would you know what that means? Like, you have no context for any of that. Yeah, I mean, it's humans like not being able to turn that part of their brains off when they're writing. But
it's because apes didn't write this movie.
Yeah, what we needed to do was make smart apes and have them write the movie.
Then it would have just been a biography.
It would have been yeah, true.
Maybe one day. We could still get there.
We probably will get
there, yeah. We got the first part done. We were in a pandemic, so
actually, as we see in the original movie, they have cameras.
True.
So do you think they can make films?
I would love to think so, yeah. They have like a whole film program.
If
Yeah.
they prioritized finding some batteries for those cameras, I guarantee Caesar could have like walked around and, you know, made a little movie of his society.
They weren't battery cameras, like they were old-fashioned flash photography.
In the original, there's literally a scene where after they're hunting, they like all pose with like humans that they caught. And they have one of those big ass cameras like where you have to hold a thing and go like smile, and they like pull a thing and it takes a picture. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so they'd probably eventually reinvent film.
Carol, I think after I was like, Dan and I were like, okay, we're gonna rewatch the original for the references, but like we were gonna tell you to watch it because we thought you would hate it. But after this conversation, I think you would love the original because it's so dumb. Like it's
silly,
it's just fun. Like it is really fun and silly.
Yeah.
So like I feel like you might actually enjoy it, and it's also very short. So
I'm not gonna lie, when you described even like the nuclear one and it just ended with like humanity is dead, I think I would really like
guys. No, it is one of my favorite.
Oh, that's another thing I wanted to say. So like they worship isn't there a
like I think I would love how dumb that is.
Worship the nuke.
Yeah. So just for context, and then I have a point I want to make about Caesar's character arc, and we'll get to it. But before that, when I watched the originals, it was after Rise and Dawn had come out, and I had seen those, and this was the dawn, funny enough, of Angela and I, and then this ultimately extended to our whole friendship group, like, of marathoning things. It started with Planet of the Apes, because
nice.
I got my first part-time job, and I had some money, and I was like, I want to buy all the Planet of the Apes movies. So I bought my little Blu-ray package with all the Planet of the Apes movies. And I was like, hey, Angelo, do you want to just come over for like a weekend and watch 5 not even 5, we watched all of them. We watched the 5 originals and Tim Burton and the 2 new ones. So I was like, do you want to watch 8 Planet of the Apes movies where most of them are going to be bad? And he was like, sure. So we did that. And yeah, I mean, you have to remember, right? We watched the first one and I'm like, cool, this is so niche 60s sci-fi, like they really tried and they had production value. And then you get to the second one and it is like maybe the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. And like you get to the part where these guys have these big ass heads and they're telepathically communicating and they're worshiping a nuke, and then it just ends like they didn't have the budget to blow anything up, so they just fade to white and are like, and this is how the movie ends. And I mean, Angela,
like, I need you to imagine this for me real
Yeah,
quick.
close your eyes. Imagine an explosion. Like, that's literally it. And
Imagine the biggest explosion you've ever seen.
And like, you guys have to know, like, when they finished, Angela and I looked at each other and we were like, this was a mistake. Like, we can't continue watching these, but we did, and they actually do get better after that.
Nice.
But I think they're all on Disney Plus. I think the whole franchise is. I could be wrong.
think they are. I think I saw them when I was looking for these.
I would strongly recommend watching the original and immediately follow it up with Beneath the Planet of the Apes. You don't need to watch the other three. Like, they start a whole parallel timeline.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
mediocre. But, like, the first one is genuinely an engaging watch, I think. And the second one is batshit crazy. And it is worth watching. And we are going to watch it one day. Because
I need to see this movie.
It's so good.
I'd even be interested in seeing the rest. Like,
We'll
why not
watch the whole thing.
I
yeah.
also want to see the Tim Burton one because I never have.
That one's honestly the worst to me. Because it's just nothing. Like, it's just a remake, but worse.
I want to see Abraham Lincoln.
Oh my god, yeah. Abraham Lincoln, yeah.
Wait, is that actually a character?
No, it's
Well, there's a monument. It's like the Lincoln Monument, but he's an ape.
Yeah, it's really lame. You know how, like, the original ends with the broken Statue of Liberty and it's, like, really sad? Like,
Yeah.
in that one, it ends with them finding Abraham Lincoln and it's, like, stupid. And it's, like... And then, they're like, all these police cars show up, but then apes get out of the police cars and it's, like, why are you driving police cars? It's very bad. It's very
Why did
stupid.
apes choose to recreate the police?
And Abraham Lincoln? Like, what, was there an ape? Or did you just put an ape head on the existing statue? I don't know.
Yeah, that raises a lot of...
It makes no sense. It makes no sense. Okay, so back to Caesar's character arc, and
Yeah.
something I want to say here. He very much is broken and is a villain kind of for the first part of the movie, because even when they find the girl, he's like, leave her. He's the one that kills the girl's dad in cold blood. Like, he doesn't even think about
Who
it.
we later find out just defected from the military.
Yeah.
He never meant any harm to them.
Yeah, absolutely. But this franchise is really good at parallels, okay? And obviously, like, at the beginning, or at the end of Rise, there's, like, the shot of the guy, like, hanging, and Caesar walks over and walks away, and then Koba kicks him off the edge, Jacobs, which is then paralleled in Dawn when Koba's hanging, and Caesar walks over but kicks him off the edge. Just nice, like, parallel imagery. Another parallel that I think they really nail is... in the middle of the movie War, they all end up in cages again. And, like, the first time they were in cages, like, Caesar was the architect of their escape. Whereas in this, he is, like, defeated and broken and just kind of, like, waiting to die to a certain extent in his cell. And it's the other apes that, like, inspire him to want to escape this time.
They bring
and
back
that's the moment, the, like, Apes Together Strong, that, like, breaks me every time I watch it, where I'm like, this movie fucking rocks, is... Rocket walking in because he needs to, like, protect Nova.
Yeah.
And like, because Maurice is like, they're gonna fucking get her, and Rocket's like, I got this. And he walks in and he lets himself get beat up and captured. And he just, like, he signs to Caesar that he's here, and they do Apes Together Strong. And then all the apes do Apes Together Strong. And, like, I was like, okay, like, you got me. Like, again, just, like, what such wonderful character moments of everyone being like, you got us this far, we got you, and, like, we're gonna get out of here. Like, we're not gonna die here. Like, you helped us escape, but, like, we now have the tools, and come with us, and, like, we're gonna do this thing together. It's so cool, man.
Yeah, I think that's the point in the movie where I'm questioning, like, is this my favorite one?
Well, that scene is just so, like, it's so impactful. And again, set up in the first movie with the wonderful little moment of him explaining to Maurice.
Yeah.
Of, like, this is what we have to do because you need to understand that, like, together we can't be broken. And, like, they now need to, like, reflect that back to him.
They need to teach him.
Yeah. Like, don't forget. It's very much like Dark Knight Rises. When he's in the pit and, like, his dad pulled him out of the pit as a little boy, but then in Dark Knight Rises, like, he needs to make the climb out of the pit to, like, choose to be Batman again. Because Alfred's like, well, you think you just put on your cape and you're fucking Batman again? And he's like... okay, and then stuff happens, and then he ends up in the pit, and he escapes. And it's like, similar, but...
it's the why do we fall?
Yeah.
So we haven't talked about Bad Ape at all yet.
Oh, yeah.
The best, yeah. Bad Ape is... ironically, Bad Ape is the best ape.
That was also surprising to me because, I mean, they meant for it to look like this, but I thought it was a human.
Yeah.
Until when they're, like, chasing and following, and then you reveal, nope, it's just another talking ape.
That was cool to see, like, an ape from a different part of the world who already is very fluent in English.
Yeah.
Because he was exposed to the virus, or to the ALZ at some point in the past, and he, like, kind of convergently
Yeah.
It's like conversion evolution.
Exactly. That's exactly what it
It's
is.
like,
yeah.
this is happening all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it will eventually lead to a planet of apes.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk about that line. But yeah, no, that is very much what it is. And also, it's cool that he can speak but can't sign. So like they have to teach him to sign, which is fun because it's like that was all their primary means of communication, and he's like he's the next
Beyond
step.
that,
He's
yeah.
beyond
He's
that.
like a human.
He's the most human of all the apes.
I don't know how to sign, but I know how to speak English.
Exactly. And they have to like teach him. And he's also just hilarious. Like
Yeah.
he is so funny, but like not annoyingly, not like oh you put
He's cute funny.
Yeah, he's genuinely cute funny.
And it's like it's necessary because this movie is heavy, as we've said.
Yeah.
So
like when they're in his little place and the girl keeps like grabbing the thing and he's like stop that, and he keeps taking it from her, but then when they're like we have to leave, he's like no watch, like she can keep it, and she gives it back to him, and it's like no, like
and that's the Nova thing.
Yeah.
The Chevy Nova. Car, whatever, decoration, whatever you call it.
where she gets her name. Should we talk about Woody Harrelson?
Yes.
Like we alluded to, like throughout the movies, the humans are getting less and less sane. Is maybe a way to put it.
With the drug, you mean? Like with the ALZ?
Not even with the drug, but just with like the isolation of like being less and less human. So like the first one is like just society as we know it. The second one is like pandemic society, unfortunately, of like we're fighting to survive. Yeah, and then this one is just straight up Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now of like, I've lost my mind. Mm-hmm. I am a completely delusional soldier who thinks he's doing the right thing, but...
By killing my son.
Desperate.
Also, like, how bad of a life would it be to not be able to, like, speak and, like, be dumb?
Well,
like, first of all, there's a bunch of dumb people in the world now.
It's not just losing the ability to speak and that you're dumb. It's that it turns you into, like, a feral animal.
Yeah, like, you completely...
But the little
like, you
girl
just
isn't
become
a feral animal.
Not yet.
But she's also, like, young.
But she will. The idea is that she will eventually become that because
So
she
are
is
they
like.
gonna kill her?
Well, no, because she's gonna live with the apes.
Yeah, she's with the apes.
But it's like it's a nod to like in the first movie, all the humans that you see that aren't Taylor are like basically they're animals.
They're just straight
they can't
up
talk.
animals.
Not only can they not talk, they can't think like humans used to think.
Yeah, they're dumb. Very, very dumb. Well, they act on instinct. Like, I gotta find food, I gotta find shelter, I don't...
Okay, but but there's also like so many animals in the world, and we don't kill them all because they act like that.
100%. I mean, he's not justified in doing it.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying, because he made it sound like, oh yeah, there was no other solution. What, I'm gonna let this animalistic
you could
human
just let him
live?
exist.
Like, and we now kill them all and burn everything that's ever touched them? Like, obviously that's the only thing to do in this scenario. And I'm like, what, you've never like loved a puppy? Like, what the fuck, bro?
I think,
he's not justified, but I see how painful it would have been for him to see his son devolve in front of his eyes.
And I also think for him, it's more like the writing's on the wall. Like, oh, we're fucked. Like, maybe there was a chance before this, like, mutation, but now with this mutation, there is literally no chance. And I mean, he says as much when he delivers the worst line in this entire trilogy, this will become a planet of apes, which is fucking awful. And I cannot believe that made it out of the first draft of this. That's something that you got to imagine at, like, a table read. They went, haha, and then just, like, struck it out with a red line. Like, but we're not actually saying that, right? Because that's, like, dumb.
It's too dumb for these movies.
That would fit perfectly in the dumber version of these movies.
Yeah.
If it was, like, cheesy adventure sci-fi. But in this, like... movie about societal collapse and loss and like being a shell of a human being, to have someone say Planet of Apes is like, it is shocking. Like,
it's a studio note for sure.
Yeah, I fully believe it was a studio note. I fully believe Warner Brothers was like, how will they know?
Is this Warner Brothers?
I think so, yeah.
Damn.
Or at least they made the originals. I don't know if they still have the...
Well, because it's on Disney Plus.
Oh, sorry. I've been saying Warner Brothers the whole time. It's Fox. That's why it's on Disney Plus.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, because War has the 20th Century Fox logo with, like, the
ape drums?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of Apocalypse Now. Obviously, like, okay, I think the reason this one isn't my favorite, outside of the fact that I just love, like, the story Dawn is telling, is that there are a few things, like the Planet of Ape line, and like someone having to write Ape Apocalypse Now on the wall, where I'm kind of like, it is very studio notey of like, I think maybe you're pandering a little bit. Like, if you didn't write that, we would all know Woody Harrelson is Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now. Like, or if you didn't, even if you haven't seen Apocalypse Now, you would still understand what that character is. But like, you don't need like when the apes were writing their laws in Dawn, they didn't write above it the 10 Commandments. You know, it's like you just get it. Like from context, you understand this is their version of like a simplistic first rules of society. But no one called it out as the 10 Commandments. So like to have someone write Apocalypse Now, I was like, oh, okay, I don't know. It's just it's a touch too much cheese. Like we can pull back on that. We can pull back on a little bit of that stuff. Focus more on the apes together strong. Make it a bit more airtight. But yeah.
Do you want to? Okay, so this got me thinking of the first scene of this movie. It's like the siege on the old Caesar like civilization in the forest. And this is where we're introduced of like, I think this is so cool of the humans having like apes work for them in the military.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Donkeys.
And a lot of them have the Alpha and Omega on their head. And you said you wanted to wait, I think, till we recorded this to explain.
Yeah. So in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the nuke that the underground society worships is called the Alpha and Omega.
Okay.
So that's what that's a reference to. That's why their call sign is Alpha Omega, because it's a reference to the nuke from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And I remember watching it in theaters, and I was sitting there, and this movie started, and someone had Alpha Omega, and I was like, good lord. I was like, whoever made these movies cares so deeply about this franchise. That is for nobody. Like, I could go online right now and Google, like, War for Planet of the Apes, like, homage and references, and it wouldn't be fucking listed anywhere. Like, you have to truly, like, be an intense fan to even know what that is, let alone to figure out a way to put it into the story. It's wild.
Well, it was in the IMDb fun facts, so someone got it.
Someone like me that was
Did
like...
you write that?
Yeah, maybe I did. Maybe I did in another life.
So is it a reference because they worship Woody Harrelson like the people worship the
Maybe,
bomb?
because it's very culty. Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. Because I did also, even just the whole plot of them, like, having this weird sort of cult felt very much like that. Of, like, there's this underground society that's sort of operating and doing its own thing that's different from what's going on elsewhere. So yeah, that whole plot actually feels very similar. So you're right. Maybe that is like supposed to indicate that and make you think of that as a reference. That makes sense.
Although I still don't fully understand why Koba sympathizers would have
sided with
the humans. I guess it's just because it's so fractured that the whole ape civilization is like, it's a mess now. Like, people are going in every which way and direction. And that's probably what they were trying to go for, right?
Yeah, see, that's something that I also like symbolically. I agree, it's sort of like, it's maybe stretched a little bit too far in the metaphor, where it's like, well, they probably wouldn't side with the humans. But the idea that, like, they were following this one guy, and this one guy was betrayed by Caesar, and so the very cultist, extremist thing of, like, so whatever the opposite of that is what we're going to identify with.
Which, actually, that's a very real thing, because people sometimes get so swept up in being, like, basically what you just said, of, like, I need to not only not do what this person is saying, but do whatever is the opposite of what he's saying, even if that leads to the exact same thing that he was telling us to do in the first place.
Yeah.
It's like you're getting to the same destination, but because of a different reason, because you're being a stupid, like, rebel for the wrong reason.
Exactly.
That is probably exactly what they were going for, then, I would imagine.
Yeah, it makes sense. Again, true to life in a way that's kind of sad and dumb, and you don't want to be true to life, because it's like, we had talked about this going back all the way to Rise. They do a very good job of setting up, like, why the virus is what it is. So, like, when they're talking about the original version of the drug, ALZ-112, the reason they make the new version is because the original version he was giving his dad, like, the body developed antibodies that could fight off the viral component. Because for anyone who doesn't know, like, medications like this, a lot of the time, like, they have a viral component, so that way it can actually infect your body, but what they're infecting it with is the cure to whatever. That's typically how a lot of these treatments work. So that was very real science. And I remember, like, watching that after having learned about that exact thing in grade 11 bio or whatever, and I was like, haha, yeah, that is how that works. Nice. But it's cool because they set that up where he's like, well, my dad's antibodies fought it off, so I need to create a version with a stronger viral component. But that version with a stronger viral component is what ends up killing all the humans, because it's strong,
Yeah.
which is like genius. It's absolute genius. It's so cool, and it's so subtle. Like it just fits so perfectly in a story.
And also, it's that second iteration that is like aerosol form.
Yeah.
Which makes it so much easier to be spread than if it was just injected.
100%. Yeah, and then you just add in the little tweak in this one of like it mutates and now it does this other thing, and it's like, okay, cool, makes sense. It makes sense to me. I know about mutations. Delta.
And it has been 10 years
Oh my
since
God.
the creation of the original one.
Yeah. Who knows what COVID will look like in 10 years? Yeah.
I like how, as like a little final point in the movie, it's the apes that survive because they're the ones capable of like climbing the trees to get out of the way of the avalanche.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why every human at the site is killed, basically.
Well, and also it's such a nice metaphor of like this army celebrating this battle.
And then immediately
And then
fucked.
the onset of the avalanche as they're cheering for their victory, and they all get wiped out by it.
Yeah.
It's like,
and they also cause the avalanche because they're storming the base.
yeah, they literally cause the thing that destroys them, which is a metaphor for the entire franchise.
That's what I was
Yeah.
gonna say. I love so much that there was an avalanche because, like, with all of that noise and shaking, like, of course there would be one. Like,
Yeah.
we just saw it, like, snowing for a week straight. Like,
Nice little touch. Nice little final footnote
Yeah.
on...
Yeah, and then we get the epilogue of finally Caesar being able to lead his people to peace, but like we alluded to, like his time is now that he's accomplished his mission, he's ready to die.
Yeah.
And he does. And we're left basically in what looks like the region of the first movie, which is cool.
It looks pretty much exactly like the first movie, just without like the ape structures that they've built.
Yeah, I mean it's a desert.
But it's like the desert, and yeah, it
you
looks
got the
like it.
lake there that they probably the lake that they landed in the first movie.
Yep, which makes sense. And then the movie ends with a pan-up shot to the sky, and it just ends with a shot of the sky, which is also very beautiful and smart, because it's kind of like, this is the next thing, like you pointed out, like...
You know what will eventually come. But also it's just nice to have the, like, just tilt up to the sky for the ending of your movie. It means, like, a couple different things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I guess to a certain degree, it can also be read as, like, that's where, like, the last of the humans even are. Like, you could... There's maybe a reading of this of, like, that avalanche legitimately killed all the rest of the humans on Earth. We don't know that for a fact, but then the idea of panning up to the sky to be like, that's it. Like, we're out there, but, like, the apes are down here. Like, there's so many different, like, levels of that. But it's just a nice ending. And also... And Carol, I told this to Dan, but the first time we were watching this movie, when they pan up to the sky, I was like, if they fucking show a rocket ship crashing on Earth and end, I will be very mad, because the timeline, we're not at the right point in the timeline for that to happen. We still need to wait 1,000 or so years.
Yeah.
So please don't do that. And they didn't.
No. But it's just, I love it. Like, the sky is enough. You know,
Me
if
too.
you've seen the original movie, you know what we're referring to. We don't need to show a rocket ship.
Exactly.
In 1,000 or 2,000 years, this is where it will be coming into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
well, the rest is history, and we'll be seeing it because it's going to start production between late summer and early fall of this year.
So I don't have any info on whether or not this new movie is a straight up reboot, or if it's a continuation, or if it's a soft reboot.
I haven't even heard about this at all.
They're starting one,
I
but I
have
don't know what it
details.
is. Okay.
So on December 3rd, 2019, it was reported that Wes Ball is currently set to write and direct the new film. No idea who that is.
No idea.
On February 17th, 2020, it was reported that the film will be produced by Joe Hartwick Jr. and David Stark. Later that same day, Ball confirmed that he's directing the film and that it would be set after the events of war following Caesar's legacy. On May 26, 2022, Ball revealed that actually Josh Friedman will write the screenplay, while Jaffa and Silver will return as producers.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
He also said that while the film will be set in the same universe as Rise, the film won't be a direct sequel to War, saying that the film will feel like a follow-up to the overall Rise trilogy, but at the same time, the filmmakers will do some really cool new stuff for the film.
Well, that sounds like they're doing what we said 3 hours ago of just doing a time jump.
Generation
Yeah.
skip.
Yeah, a generation
That makes
skip.
the most sense.
That's cool. I'm cool for that.
Me too. And I also, like, I know Andy Serkis has said, at the time War came out, they had no idea what the future of the franchise was, but they knew Caesar's story was done.
Yeah.
He's dead, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, even we're not going to see him probably even in it. Like, ideally, I think this movie will acknowledge him and do nothing more with his name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is how it should be.
For sure. And I just hope that because this is such a perfect prequel trilogy, I hope they don't fuck that up. Like, don't start adding in stuff that makes the timeline not make sense.
Yeah.
Like, you've literally nailed it as a prequel trilogy. So if you're going to do something, like, and you want to make it totally different, then go do it, like, on an offshoot. Like, on another part of the Earth, maybe. Maybe there's a separately developed...
Just be like, hey, we heard about this ape named Caesar on, like, the Western Hemisphere or whatever.
Exactly.
He had some good ideas.
Yeah, something like that. Or maybe, like, Bad Ape leaves and goes and deals with that. Like, I mean, they probably won't. They're probably going to do a whole generation skip. But regardless...
Well, I would think so, because this is probably going to be... It's sometime between War and their original.
Yeah.
This is their opportunity to jump way forward and actually tie the end of this new trilogy in maybe directly with the original one.
Maybe. That would be cool.
That'd be ambitious.
I would also...
Well, it would be interesting, though, to see the apes in the original one are much more evolved than the apes we see in these movies.
Very humanoid.
It would be cool to see with today's technology how they look in a movie.
That would be cool. I hope we get that.
With, like, the outfits and everything.
Oh, that would actually be really cool, now that you're saying it. I would love to see it. Well, I look forward to it. I hope it's good.
We'll have to wait and see.
Okay, guys, here's all the references I have for War. Let's get it out of the way.
Right.
So, Alpha Omega Group is a reference to the nuke. Very unfortunate. So throughout the movies, it got easier for Caesar in particular to talk. But, like, the apes in general, like we talked about, or you talked about that point. Yeah, Cornelius is named after the mother. Yeah. Okay, so humans not being able to speak because of the mutation obviously is a very cool twist for this movie, but, like, Carol, you weren't aware at the time, but now you are. The humans in the original are all, like we said, they can't speak, and they are just, like, wild animals. So seeing that for the first time, I was like, oh, that is so clever. Like, I didn't even think they would acknowledge it. I thought it would just be like, yeah, after decades...
They devolved.
Actually, after hundreds of years, they completely devolved. But it's like, no, we have a built-in reason.
And, like, if they had, it would have still been fine. But the fact that they went that extra mile...
Yeah. It just goes to show. Okay, so the little girl named Nova. This is a big one. So in the original, Charlton Heston Taylor, the astronaut that came down, because it's a movie from the 60s, falls in love with this woman who literally serves no purpose to the plot, but she's just one of the prisoners that the apes have captive, and she's hot, so he likes to hang out with her. And he literally just talks to her about, like, how much sex he had back on Earth, and, but her name is Nova. So the little girl in this being named Nova and not being able to speak, I remember the first time watching it, I was kind of like, I don't know, because Caesar's son is also named Cornelius, and so I was like, and he's one of the apes from the original, so I was like, well, if he ages up and Nova ages up, they would be about the same age, but the problem is, in the original, the apes are so far devoid of humanity, they don't even remember humans being able to be smart. They think humans were always animals. They don't even remember their origins as apes. So, like, that doesn't necessarily line up, but Dan had a good theory, which is, like, maybe as society goes forward, like, there are just certain names that keep getting passed down. So, like, the name Cornelius just becomes an incredibly common, like, John Smith name. But we just see the origins of it. Same with Nova. Maybe, like, all the female human prisoners just get named Nova because they had this one named Nova. So, like, regardless, like, it's a cool reference. Doesn't necessarily line up timeline-wise, but, like, it leaves the ability to interpret and do fun things. At one point, when they pick up Nova, they are all on horseback, kind of, like, riding along the shoreline of, like, a beach, which is a very clear visual similarity to the ending of the first one, when Charlton Heston is riding along the beach with Nova and finds the Statue of Liberty. That was, like, a super iconic... I have the poster right there. Oh, yeah. It's literally that scene from the movie, so that is obviously that... Yeah, okay, so the X's, like, the crosses. Yeah. Okay, so... In the first one, right, in the original Planet of the Apes, they crash land on this planet, and they're like, we don't know what this planet is. And they're walking around in the desert, and they're, like, trying to find anywhere to go.
Very leisurely, I might add. They're
yeah.
not worried at all that they might die on this strange planet.
Also, like, just no mask. They don't know what the atmosphere is, but they're like, we're men from
At one
the
point,
60s.
they go for a swim.
Yeah. And they just start drinking the water. They haven't done anything. Anyway, so, and then they laugh at a flag, which is very weird. But anyway, But in that beginning, they're kind of walking around and exploring, and they find these like wood crosses all around like these plains and on hills. And they kind of theorize, Charlton Heston is like, like I wonder if those are supposed to be like scarecrows, like the equivalent of like scarecrows for this society. Who knows? And it's literally never explained. It's just like a fun world building. Oh, there is something going on here. And then you realize that the thing going on there is apes, which should be pretty obvious from the name of the movie, if you knew what movie you were watching. So in this one, when they fucking show those crosses and they show the apes being tortured on those crosses, I just about lost my mind in the theater. I was like, that is so goddamn cool that exists in world and is explained as like a thing that was used for torture for apes.
Here's a question.
Yeah.
In the original then, after having seen War, do you think that they were there because they're left over from what we see in War, or that apes adopted that method of torturing apes?
I've thought a lot about this. I would like to believe it's left over. I like to believe
we're seeing the same ones.
It's the remnants of human society, because then when he's like, whatever society is here has these weird things, it even just like brings it all full circle further of like, it's your society, but you just don't know because you've been gone for so long. I would like to think that. Canonically, I mean, realistically, 2,000 years have passed, so you got to imagine the same things haven't just been there the whole time. I acknowledge that.
Down.
But I would really like to think that it was the ones left by the humans, because I think that drives home the metaphor a little bit better.
It would make more sense with the story, yeah. Although, in the OG one, like, at the end of the movie, Cornelius and the other scientists are being put on trial.
Yeah.
So maybe they have the death sentence or something.
That is true. That could be
society.
That could be that. And again, that's one of those things nobody fucking talks about, because you would have to know, and like most people don't. Yeah, and then so the last one I have is the whole idea of this being a war movie, because it's funny how this trilogy very much mirrors the last 3 movies of the original 5. Because like I said, there's like the original one, and then there's its sequel, but that sequel blows up the earth. So like those two kind of are a thing. But then the next 3 are sort of their own trilogy of the apes going back in time and bringing their son with them, which is sort of like the beginnings of it. The next one, which is sort of like him living within human culture, but then like having his own like band of apes and like taking over. And then the last one is straight up just a war movie. And so like this trilogy also resembles the arc of that trilogy. And so this one being a war movie very much resembles the arc of where that one left off. Just like good and better. And like makes sense. Good. But if you view this as canonically prequel to the original Planet of the Apes in the original timeline, it's also really cool, because then when the alternate timeline happens, and that alternate, like the trilogy that ends that series, it is the thing of like history repeating itself, but just in a different way. So like it's even like cooler that it kind of mirrors it, but with different particulars. I don't think anyone thought about that, but it worked out that way.
It's cool that Caesar is the protagonist in those too, though.
His name isn't originally Caesar in the 3rd one. He has a different name, but then in the 4th one, he changes his name to Caesar.
Oh, okay. But obviously it's just another ape named
someone
Caesar.
Caesar. And that's where they got it from. Carol, any closing thoughts?
Has your opinion changed from the beginning of this recording at all? Or not?
Like I said, I did have the realization that I think it's just like too good for me to handle. I do think there probably will not come a time where I will be able to handle it, because unfortunately life has made me a pessimist, so I don't think things are going to get better. So I think I'm just going to avoid shit like this more and more as time goes on. But yeah, I do recognize they're great movies. I respect the art, I respect the storytelling, but just too much of a downer for me.
It's fair.
Yeah.
It's fair.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm very curious then about next week's discussion on a very downer piece of content that is also
but it's
great.
more supernatural, so I'm cool with it.
It's more like just horror than sci-fi.
Yeah, I had fun with that.
Interesting. I mean, I obviously love both of them, but we're talking about Midnight Mass. We're doing Midnight Mass next week.
Surprise.
For Easter. For Easter, just in time for Easter. The show literally takes place at Easter, so that's good timing. That one was the one that I thought was like more harder to watch for me, even though it had supernatural stuff, because it felt more real, where I was like, Yeah, people do this. People justify their shitty actions in the name of stuff that they don't
Yeah.
even know what they're talking about. But we'll get into that when we get into that. But yeah,
Very excited.
just a couple of downer episodes.
Yeah, but honestly, these are my favorite.
But then right after that, we have some levity.
this is
It'll be
good.
fine.
I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about Midnight Mass next week, though.
I'm looking forward to it. What?
What's up?
So I went to export it, and it just said there was an error, and it couldn't be exported. And there was no option to save anything. It just crashed. So I don't know
Are you
what
shaming?
to do.
You don't have there's no recovery file for it?
Like you lost the whole episode?
It's not giving me that option.
Well, I mean, maybe your audio picked up on our end. I mean, it would be shitty audio, but we could check our recording instead of, like, mixing the tracks together.
Oh, fuck.
It's possible we were loud enough.
I mean, that's not going to work anyway because we didn't even hit the fucking record button on our end.
What?
Oh my god. All this time. We did it. We finally really did it. You maniac! You lost it! Ah, damn you! God damn you all the hell! Alright, thanks guys. Thanks for...
Yeah, no problem.